Hogwarts, The Return of Turmoil. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Animagus. The Marauder's map couldn't be wrong. The only people in the school who knew how right Mosby appeared were probably Maureen and his 3 companions. But even Maureen couldn't explain how Mosby suddenly appeared on the map. Do you think there might be a secret passage there? Hugo guessed. Maureen shook his head. I also found a few secret passages in Hogwarts on the map yesterday, but there is no secret passage on the 7th floor. Lily, however, held her chin and frowned, thinking about something. What's wrong, Lily? Are you thinking about how to force Sweet to tell the truth? Hugo asked. No, I remember Dad said there is a room of requirement on the 8th floor of Hogwarts. People who enter the room of requirement will not be shown on the map. Lily said, and then she explained to Maureen what the room of requirement was. Hugo denied it flatly. No, I heard from my parents that the room of requirement was destroyed. It was a very powerful black magic flame, and it could no longer be used. They only said that the fiend fire devoured everything, but they didn't say it couldn't be used. Wake up, the room of requirement is not so easy to be destroyed. It can change its appearance to meet any requirements, and it may also be able to change its appearance to deal with the fiend fire. Lily retorted. But Mosby appeared on the 7th floor, not the 8th floor. Maureen said. Hugo and Lily were also very curious about this matter, but unfortunately, they still had to take the Transfiguration class. The one who taught the Transfiguration class was Professor Kane, a bald old man, who reminded Maureen of his grandfather Alton. The most basic magic for wizards is the Transfiguration spell, which turns one thing into another. This requires skill. When casting a spell, you need to consider the 3 major elements of spells, actions, and the concept of transformation. This is very important. Professor Kane waved his wand and turned the book into an owl, and the owl also made 2 crisp calls. Kane continued, the highest level of transformation is to transform into a human, such as turning a human into a fox. This is already a very advanced transformation. At least you can't master it at your age. You'll be lucky if you can turn a match into a needle. Hugo looked at the owl on the podium with admiration and whispered, I must learn this magic so that I can pick up a stone and use it as an owl, and even send letters. Don't think too much, the magic will fail. You definitely don't want your owl to turn into a stone and fall on your head halfway through flying. Maureen said. At this moment, someone in the classroom suddenly raised his hand. Do you have any questions? Professor Kane asked. Everyone turned their heads and found that the person who raised his hand to ask the question was Sweet, who was sitting in the corner of the classroom. Professor, I would like to ask, what is the difference between turning a person into an animal and an animagus? Sweet asked. He finally spoke. I thought he was a mute. Hugo said in a low voice, and then asked Maureen, what does animagus mean? Don't you even know this? It means that a person can turn into an animal at will. Maureen explained in her low voice. Professor Kane motioned Sweet to sit down, and then continued, this classmate's question is very interesting. I say interesting because it is a knowledge point. In the senior grades, you need to distinguish the difference between turning people into animals and animagus. The 2 can be explained from 9 angles. Experienced wizards can directly see the difference between the 2. Professor Kane walked slowly in the classroom. You will learn these later. Here I will just briefly tell you that it is difficult to turn others into animals or yourself. A wizard uses a magic wand to turn others into animals, which is equivalent to casting magic on others. We know that the magic cast will always fail, so after a while the spell will be lifted, and the person will automatically change back. The risk is not great, and there is no need to worry about being turned into an animal forever. By the way, wizards can resist the magic of others. It is basically difficult for you to turn other wizards into animals, unless your magic power is much stronger than the other party, such as me for you. Professor Kane walked to Hugo and casually tapped Hugo's right hand with his magic wand. Hugo's hand suddenly turned into an eagle's wing with bright and beautiful feathers. Wow, cool. Can I fly? Hugo looked at his right hand covered with feathers with shining eyes. He thought this magic was so awesome that he wanted Professor Kane to turn his left hand into wings so that he could try to flap his wings to see if he could fly. But Professor Kane smiled and said, if I turn you into an eagle, you should be able to fly for a while, but we teachers generally don't turn students into animals, Because if you are halfway through flying and the magic disappears, you will fall from the sky. I'm sure you don't want to see this. Falling from the sky is not a pleasant feeling, and you may even lose your life. Professor Kane tapped his wand again, and Hugo's hand returned to normal. Professor Kane continued, in comparison, it is more difficult to turn yourself into an animal, and the requirements are higher, because animagus is very risky. After turning into an animal, you will have animal thoughts and it is easy to confuse yourself. Once you forget that you are a human, you may not even be able to recover. The magic is cast on yourself, and unless you die, the magic will not fail. This is different from turning someone else into an animal. If you can't recover yourself and others don't know that you have turned into an animal, then you can only live in animal form for the rest of your life. Therefore, for the sake of safety, the Ministry of Magic requires all wizards who learn animagus to register your transformed characteristics, so that when an accident occurs, the Ministry of Magic can find you based on your characteristics and help recover. Don't think that animagus is cool and learn it without registering the characteristics. This is unwise. The latest novel is first published on Liuji 9 Shuba. All the freshmen nodded, half understanding. Although Professor Kane said the consequences of animagus were very serious, no one took it seriously. Freshmen were always curious about mysterious magic. I think animagus is great. I want to become a Norwegian Spinosaurus. Hugo looked eager to try. If he could become a majestic fire dragon, it would be very cool to go out. Don't think about it. Have you forgotten Peter Pettigrew? I heard that when he turned into a mouse, he was always chased by Crookshanks. If you turn into a Norwegian Spinosaurus, you might be found by Ollivander one day, and he would skin you alive and use your nerves to make a wand. Lily poured cold water on Hugo at the right time. The wand made from it must be very powerful. Hugo looked optimistic. Maybe it will be more powerful than the old wand made of elder. If you die, you will turn back into a human. The professor just said that magic will be ineffective when a person dies, so you will have no chance to make a wand. At most, you will get a sentence from Ollivander. Oh, sorry, I killed the wrong person, kid. Maureen said beside him. Hugo rolled his eyes. That kind of death was indeed very innocent. Chapter 27 Astronomy. The whole class was listening to Professor Kane's excited explanation about turning into animals, only Sweet was writing something down in the book, which made Maureen quite curious. Animagus was a subject for seniors, and Professor Kane clearly said that this was their future knowledge, and they just needed to understand it, but why did Sweet take notes? He doesn't want to learn animagus, does he? Hugo whispered, what does he want to turn into? A snail that can't chirp. Hugo, it's very rude to say that to others. Lily said. Hugo shrugged his shoulders. He gives people a very mysterious feeling. Maureen didn't think much about it, and began to take out his wand to practice turning a match into a needle. The content of the Transfiguration class was interesting and difficult. Except for Hugo lighting the match again and again, the class went smoothly. Maureen learned magic faster than everyone else. This was his innate talent. Basically, a magic could be mastered in less than 3 practices, which made him the envy of the whole class. You are really a top student. Mom will be very happy that there is a top student in my dormitory. Hugo sighed while holding his chin and looking at his 18th burnt match. Then he remembered something and said with a smile, but this also means that I don't have to worry about my class assignments. It's not bad to think about it. The time of learning magic passed quickly, because everyone tried magic for the first time and was very interested in it. Except for the defense against the dark arts class that was always under the threat of death and the history of magic that was like a lullaby, other courses were acceptable. Maureen only did very badly in 2 courses, one of which was Muggle Studies. As expected, both Maureen and Hugo failed the quiz in the first Muggle Studies class, so they had to take the Muggle Studies class. Professor Charles of the Muggle Studies class was an old gentleman. He knew a lot about the lifestyle of Muggles, from dressing to traveling, but many students from wizarding families were not interested in Muggles. Why do we need to know the difference between a TV and a computer? What does it have to do with us whether a computer can be used for hitting? I don't understand why Muggles use computers for hitting. Can't they just take out their ones and start a fire? Hugo kept complaining when he went to the cafeteria after class. Maureen was surprised and said, "Are computers used for heating? I thought Muggle computers were used for washing clothes. Computers are used for heating. I remember it very clearly." Professor Charles also said that there might be an exam at the end of the semester. Hugo said with certainty, "Is that so?" Then I'll revise my notes later. Maureen was also confused by the content of the Muggle Studies class. Growing up in a wizard family, it was too difficult for her to understand the lifestyle of Muggles. Maureen also did very badly in another course, which was astronomy. Wizards study astronomy mainly because many major events can be found in the laws of the movement of planets and stars in the sky. When Venus, the Sun and the Moon form a 45-degree angle, an earthquake will occur in some corner of the world. When Mars, the Sun and Jupiter form a 90-degree angle, a volcanic eruption will occur in a part of the Earth. When Mercury and Pluto orbit to the constellation Sagittarius, a place in the world will be flooded. These things all have signs, and what the wizard has to do is to calculate the specific location of the natural disaster based on the star positions and then remind people all over the world. We wizards have a special natural disaster forecasting department. You can listen to it by turning on the radio at 7 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday night. We must listen to the wizard star forecast before each class to better cultivate our astronomical literacy. It is exactly 7 o'clock now, and everyone can listen to it. Professor Sinistra, the astronomy teacher, carried a dragon skin radio and placed it on the table in the middle of the tower. She took out her wand and tapped the radio, Sagittarius. After a while, she explained, the spell of the star forecast channel is related to the meteor shower. The constellation that will observe the meteor shower recently, the spell is that constellation. For example, last month's spell was Andromeda. A relaxed and pleasant voice soon rang out on the radio. Hello everyone, welcome to Turn on the Radio on Time. Wizards have star forecasts, so you can know the disaster risks first. I am astrologer Neptune. Hello everyone, I am astrologer Jupiter. The speaker was a woman with a sweet voice. Neptune said, the weather is clear tonight, and it's a good time to observe the night sky. So, Miss Jupiter, have you seen anything from the changes in the stars today? The wizard named Jupiter said, we originally expected the Gepper meteorite to hit Jupiter's moon Europa to occur next Sunday, but it happened earlier last night. The derailment of the Gepper meteorite formed a 39-degree angle with the Sun. Through the analysis of the wizard's astronomical lap theorem, we can know that there will be an underwater volcano in the center of the Pacific Ocean that will erupt violently and destroy the ecology of the isolated island. But this disaster is far away from us, so there is no need to worry. What you need to worry about is the hail in 2 minutes tonight. This hail will cover the mountains to the east, in the direction of Hogwarts School, but it will not last too long. Everyone remember to be prepared. Professor Sinistra immediately said, everyone go to the lower floor of the tower to avoid the hail. The freshmen who had just started astronomy were skeptical, especially Hugo and Maureen. Can it really be accurate to 2 minutes? I don't really believe in these things. Maureen said. In his eyes, the stars in the sky are all the same, just a bright point. What difference can there be? I don't believe it either, but if this prediction is right, I will study astronomy well. Maybe I can know in advance when my good luck will come in the future. Hugo walked slowly at the end. Before the two of them entered the tower stairs, Hugo suddenly held his head and shouted, who hits me? Hail! Lily said. Then more hail fell. Hugo ran in screaming, and Maureen was also surprised to see the hail crackling and jumping on the ground at the stairs. At some point in the sky, a dark cloud floated and covered the moon. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. This hail can also be achieved through magic, right? Maureen muttered. Don't be silly. The weather in Hogwarts will not be affected by magic. Whatever the weather outside is, the weather in Hogwarts will be the same. No wizard can make it snow or rain over Hogwarts. Lily seemed to know a lot. Hugo touched his head and said with a grin, I hate hail. The hail lasted only 5 minutes and ended. The dark clouds in the sky had drifted away, and the stars and the moon peeked out again. In the subsequent astronomy class, Professor Sinistra taught everyone how to identify the constellations in the sky and asked everyone to fill in the stars they observed on the constellation table. Maureen held a telescope. For some reason, the stars were always inexplicably misplaced in his eyes. According to the professor's guidance, Venus, which should have been the brightest, was filled in the position of Mars. You are the only one in the class who can fill in the wrong one. Can't you recognize the brightest star? Professor Sinistra was very unhappy when he saw Maureen fill in the wrong one when he was guiding everyone on the constellation table. But the Venus I saw is in that direction. Maureen was sure that he was not mistaken. He even used Lily and Hugo's brass telescope to check it out, and he was sure of it. Hugo whispered, Hey, brother, How could you mistake Venus for Jupiter? Even I know where Venus is. I don't know either. Maureen was puzzled. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28: Astronomical Disasters. Professor Sinistra told all the freshmen how to identify the 9 planets. This is the most basic astronomical knowledge, and everyone is required to master it. Toby, who was born a Muggle, raised his hand and said, "Professor, but what I learned before is what everyone calls Muggles, saying that there are only 8 planets now." Professor Sinistra said disdainfully, "Oh, Muggles. Toby, you have to understand that Muggles have a different definition of planets than wizards. They don't believe in planetary divination, nor do they understand the relationship between the laws of the movement of planets and social humanities. So you have to distinguish the Muggle concept and remember that you are a wizard now. Okay, everyone hurry up and finish the constellation chart and hand it in before the end of get out of class." But the astronomy class was almost a disaster for Maureen Walker. "This is the position of Mercury. Why did you fill in Jupiter? This is the position of Pluto, not Saturn. Saturn has a ring. How could you make a mistake? This is the position of Sirius, not Uranus." Honestly, Maureen Walker, do you have such a poor understanding of the stars? There are only 9 basic planets, and you didn't learn all 9 planets in one night. Professor Sinistra criticized Maureen's constellation chart all night. It was not that she deliberately made things difficult for Maureen, but because the positions of the planets that Maureen filled in were all wrong. Dude, what's wrong with you? You are so good at learning spells and transfiguration, how come you can't figure out the 9 planets? I figured it out in 20 minutes. It's really not difficult. Hugo looked at Maureen in confusion. I observed the sky according to the characteristics of the 9 planets in the book, and the positions of the 9 planets I saw were like that. Maureen didn't know how to explain it. The book said that Saturn had a bright halo, which was very clear with the wizard's brass telescope. He did find Saturn with a halo in the sky, but the Saturn he saw was at the position of Pluto. He could recognize all the characteristics of the planets, but the positions of the planets in his eyes were different from those in other people's eyes. Maureen finally had no choice but to change his constellation table to the same as Hugo's and hand it in. He looked in a terrible mood, even worse than after the Muggle Studies class. He really didn't understand Muggle things in Muggle Studies, but he could clearly recognize the planets in astronomy, but the positions he saw were always different from those of others. Don't think about it, buddy. At least you are the only one in the class who successfully turned a match into a needle today. In the common room, Hugo stuffed a chocolate frog into Maureen. Yes, I am also the only one in the class who filled in the wrong 9 planets. Maureen took the chocolate frog and opened the wrapper. The chocolate frog jumped hard and tried to jump away, but Maureen grabbed it and bit off its head. Hugo sat on the chair and yawned. Don't think about it. I heard that there are always some wizards who are different from others. Some wizards can't use the fire spell in their entire lives. Some wizards can't recite the flying spell, just like some spells are forbidden to some wizards and can't be recited. There are so many strange things in the wizarding world. It's normal that you can't understand astronomy. It means that you are not suitable for studying astronomy. Go to bed quickly. There are classes tomorrow. It was already late at night. The freshmen of Gryffindor had gone to bed. Only the dim lights were flickering in the common room. Maureen stared at the flames burning in the fireplace, and all kinds of questions were in his mind. It was only 2 days after the start of school, and he encountered a lot of strange things. What happened yesterday when he went back to the past, the disappearance of Mosby in the morning, and the astronomy in the evening, none of them were clear to him. The door of the Gryffindor common room was pushed open again, and a man walked in. Maureen looked up and found that it was Sweet. Sweet also saw Maureen, but turned around and walked towards the dormitory building without saying a word. Maureen couldn't help but say from behind, "Sweet, do I have any grudge against you? Why did you say that to me yesterday?" Sweet stopped and was silent for a long time. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end he didn't speak. He continued to walk towards the dormitory and ignored Maureen. Maureen felt puzzled. Yesterday at noon in the library, this guy said to him, "You'd better be careful," without a beginning or an end, which made him still confused. Am I thinking too much, or is this world crazy? Maureen said to himself. Of course you think too much, dear. The portrait on the wall of the Gryffindor common room spoke. It was an old man with a white beard and white beard, Dumbledore, the greatest headmaster of Hogwarts. There are portraits of him in many places in the school. I hope so. Good night, Professor Dumbledore. Maureen stood up and walked towards the dormitory. Good night, kid. Have some lemon ice cream when you have time. I always eat it when I'm thinking about things, Dumbledore said with a smile. When Maureen returned to the dormitory, his roommates were already asleep. Sweet had pulled down the bed curtains to prevent others from seeing him. Maureen climbed onto his bed and stared at the ceiling in a daze. He didn't sleep well that night and had a series of strange dreams. In his dreams, Peeves was chasing him with a root of whiskers, and the planets in the sky also moved and turned into a fire dragon and pounced on him. When he was awakened, he found that the sky was just beginning to turn white. It was only 5 o'clock in the morning. Maureen turned over and accidentally glanced at Sweet's bed opposite him. He found that Sweet had pulled up the bed curtains and folded the quilt neatly, but he was gone. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. So early. Maureen frowned. Where were you going so early? He was no longer sleepy, so he simply pulled out the spells textbook from the bedside table and tried to recite a few simple spells according to the instructions in the book. A few days ago, when Maureen was at home, he often failed when he tried to cast spells by himself. But since Professor Flitwick told everyone the basic points and experience of spells, Maureen found that spells require skills. He quickly mastered the skills and practiced spells with ease. A simple spell was successful after only 3 attempts. His super talent for spells made him feel better. At least the wand didn't go against me, Wingardium Leviosa. Maureen waved his wand, and the sheets that were kicked under the bed by Hugo floated into the air, and then fell back onto Hugo's bed. He was still very satisfied with the levitation spell he cast. When it was time for breakfast, Maureen picked up the wand and said to Hugo, "Freeze 3 feet." A thin layer of frost covered Hugo's face, and Hugo shouted, "Ah! Lily! Don't break into the male god's dormitory again." Hugo got up in a daze and went to wash up, not knowing that the spell was cast by Maureen. Maureen smiled, and the bad mood of astronomy last night was swept away. Chapter 29 Flying Lesson. If there is any course that students are most interested in, it is probably the flying class. Quidditch is a fascinating sport for wizards, and even Muggle-born students can't wait to ride a flying broomstick in the air. The weather was fine and the sun was warm on their bodies. This was their first flying lesson, and they took it with Slytherin and practiced on the Quidditch field. Madame Hooch was old and her hair was gray, but she was still energetic. Her eyes were golden and flashed a unique light. Quidditch is a sacred sport. I hope everyone will take it seriously. Whether you have the talent for flying or not, at least you must learn how to ride a flying broomstick. This is a necessary ability for wizards. Madame Hooch said sternly to everyone. She is not someone who can be easily messed with. Hugo whispered to Maureen. "Shut up, Weasley, you are not allowed to be absent in my class." Madame Hooch's ears were sharp. Hugo quickly shut his mouth. Madame Hooch explained the key points of using the flying broom, how to keep balance on the flying broom, and how to make the flying broom easier to control. The flying broom is spiritual. You should treat it as a pet. If you conquer it, it will obey you. If you are timid, it will not listen to you. Okay, everyone stand next to the flying broom and shout "Get up to the flying broom." Remember, the voice must be strong. Madame Hooch said. Maureen shouted "Get up" to his flying broom, and the flying broom jumped into his hands. The flying broom didn't oppose me. Very good. Maureen looked at his flying broom, and then looked at the others. Not many people succeeded in getting the flying broom up for the first time. Lily and Maureen both succeeded. Hugo's flying broom did not jump into his hands, but rushed towards Madame Hooch. "Be more confident, Weasley." Madame Hooch quickly grabbed the flying broom. This is not a practice spell. Madame Hooch began to walk around among the students, criticizing those who did not do the right posture. "By the way, Maureen, your Nimbus 2000 is an antique from more than 20 years ago. It broke last time. Don't fly more than 10 meters, otherwise it will get out of control. But don't worry, I won't let you fly too high in the first class. I have applied to the school to buy a new broom. You just have to make do with it for now." Madame Hooch said to Maureen. The brooms that students practice flying are all Nimbus 2005. The performance of the flying brooms in the Nimbus series is very good. The Comet series has been eliminated. The most advanced flying brooms now are the Firebolt 15 model and the newly released Windhawk. The Firebolt once led an era and was the best broom, while the Windhawk was a broom that was just released last year and was said to be able to defeat the Firebolt. Maureen has always wanted to have one, but the price is too expensive and he can't afford it. Okay, everyone knows the rules. Now, everyone rides on the flying broomsticks. Let's practice the quaffle first. We will throw it to each other in the air, in pairs. One of you Gryffindors will take a leave. Then Maureen, there is something wrong with your broom, so practice with me. Madam Hooch said. One person taking a leave. Maureen glanced at the Gryffindor classmates and found that Sweet was not there. Why did he take a leave? Hugo asked in a low voice. Maureen shook his head. He didn't know. They didn't see Sweet when they got up in the morning since the beginning of the school. Now he took a leave for no reason. It was really strange. Hugo and Lily were in the same group. Lily had a high talent for flying. Her parents were both on the Gryffindor team when they were students. She inherited her talent from her parents. Lily, don't go around or I can't catch it. Ouch! Hugo was hit on the head by the quaffle thrown by Lily. After Maureen got on the flying broom, he felt the wind gently brushing against his face. He was as light as a bird. Although Madam Hooch said there was something wrong with his broom, the Nimbus 2000 was very obedient in his hands. It turned and flew up and down very naturally. He didn't miss any of the quaffles thrown by Madam Hooch. He even secretly tried the whirlwind roll, which is a Quidditch flying move. Both hands and feet are attached to the broom, and the whole body is rapidly flipped forward. This flying method can increase the speed to a higher level. Maureen saw it in the Alta Hurricane team's game last time. Not bad, very talented. Madam Hooch discovered Maureen's whirlwind roll and praised it. Even ordinary Quidditch players couldn't do this move. Maureen stopped a broom firmly in the air, but at this moment, he felt something in the air behind him seem to cut through the air. Maureen grabbed his hand back without looking back, and a quaffle was firmly in his hand. Maureen turned around and looked at the source of the quaffle. Carlo was not far away and staring at him gloomily. Carlo, watch the direction you throw the ball. You should throw it to Column. Madam Hooch said to Carlo sternly. Sorry, Madam Hooch, the ball slipped out of my hand. Carlo apologized, but there was no apology in the look he gave Maureen. It's a pity you don't have more hands, otherwise you could throw a few more quaffles to attack me from behind. One quaffle is not enough. While Madam Hooch was instructing others, Maureen turned the broom and said to Carlo. The latest novels are first published on 6th book bar. Don't be so proud. Carlo stared at Maureen coldly, and suddenly twisted the broom and rushed towards Maureen. Carlo's flying skills were not bad either. He was flying a Nimbus 2005 series, which was much faster than Maureen's Nimbus 2000. He wanted to use the advantage of the broom to knock Maureen off the broom. But Maureen just turned lightly and dodged Carlo. Hey, Carlo, I'll give you the quaffle back. Maureen threw the quaffle in his hand towards Carlo. He threw the ball very fast. Before Carlo could react, the quaffle hit his nose. Ugh! Carlo groaned, covered his nose, and looked at Maureen angrily. I was counting on your reaction to be faster. Maureen spread his hands. However, Carlo winked at his partner Calm, and then Calm and Carlo surrounded Maureen from the left and right. Maureen raised his broom a little higher and avoided the two people, but at this moment, his broom shook violently and began to shake from side to side. Not good. Maureen had been flying high just now. In order to avoid Carlo and Calm, his flying height was already over 10 meters. His broom was broken, and it would be out of control if it flew over 10 meters. HMPH, let's see what you can do this time. Carlo sneered, and while Maureen's broom was shaking left and right, he threw the quaffle at Maureen again, and at the same time, the two rushed up again, trying to knock Maureen off the broom. Chapter 30 Disappearance. Maureen's broomstick was shaking from side to side. He tried hard to straighten it, but it was out of his control and flew higher and higher. At this time, Carlo and Calm were close, and the quaffle was also hitting him. Maureen barely lowered his head and dodged the quaffle. Carlo had already swung his body and the end of the broomstick was hitting Maureen's body. At this time, Maureen made a very risky move. He suddenly jumped off his broomstick and dodged Carlo. At the moment when Carlo fell, he grabbed the tail of Carlo's broomstick and hung in the air. Carlo's broomstick had the weight of an extra person, especially when the tail was grabbed, it began to tilt. Carlo exclaimed and tried to shake Maureen off, but his flying skills were not up to this level. The two were in a stalemate in the air. Maureen had already turned over and rode on the broomstick and sat behind Carlo. Carlo swung his elbow hard, trying to knock Maureen down, but Maureen had already taken out his wand and shouted "Petrify all." Carlo's whole body froze. "This method can't do anything to me." Maureen controlled the flying broom to land on the ground. "Dirty tricks." Carlo and Calm, Slytherin deducts 10 points. Madame Hooch shouted at Carlo angrily. She just saw how Carlo and Calm dealt with Maureen, and then saw how Maureen saved himself. Madame Hooch looked at Maureen in surprise. He jumped up on the out-of-control flying broom, and then accurately grabbed Carlo's flying broom. Such agility was quite agile. "Maureen, good, you did a good job. Even Al couldn't do this." "Very good. But remember, wands are not allowed on the court." Madame Hooch lifted the petrification spell on Carlo and criticized Carlo severely. During the break, Hugo kept covering his nose and arguing with Lily. He was hit by Lily's quaffle several times. "You just performed really well," Lily exclaimed to Maureen. "Honestly, you should join the school Quidditch team. Freshmen can't participate in Quidditch games. Let's talk about it next year." Maureen looked at Hugo and couldn't help laughing. "In fact, Lily, you should also participate in the Quidditch selection. You'd better be a beater and hit the bludger hard on the opponent's nose." "Yes, whoever is Lily's opponent will suffer," Hugo said angrily. The mysterious magic castle of Hogwarts is said to hide many secrets, one of which is the Room of Requirement. But when Maureen and his friends went to the 8th floor to find the Room of Requirement, they couldn't find it, as if the room had really disappeared. Time passed quickly, and in a blink of an eye, Maureen, who had been in school for a month, learning magic courses, was still very easy for Maureen. Except for the confusing Muggle studies class and the disaster astronomy that made Maureen feel incredible, other courses were not difficult for Maureen. "I really envy Lily that she doesn't have to study Muggle studies. Professor Charles has assigned her a lot of homework." "Maureen, how do Muggles communicate with each other? Do they also use owls?" Hugo asked while holding the parchment. "It's the weekend now, and the two of them are catching up on their homework in the common room." Maureen said uncertainly, "Maybe they use dogs? I remember that many Muggle families have dogs. They should use dogs to convey information, just like we keep owls." "Oh, so that's it." Hugo quickly wrote the answer on the parchment. Maureen looked at the constellation map in front of him with a sad face. Professor Sinistra asked them to record the constellation map on Saturday night. He carefully searched in the sky with a telescope for a long time, but the star positions he recorded were different from Hugo's. "It's terrible. Why do I see different planets than you do?" Maureen has been criticized by Professor Sinistra in every astronomy class for the past month. He has now become Professor Sinistra's least favorite student. "It's okay, you can just copy from me in the future," Hugo said very righteously. In addition to astronomy, he can complete other homework such as spells and transfiguration by himself. It is not difficult for the two to help each other to complete the homework. With Maureen, they can basically get high scores. Of course, except for Muggle studies, two people who know nothing about Muggles do Muggle studies homework together. Basically, they have to guess the lifestyle of Muggles. The probability of guessing correctly is terrible. Lily pushed open the door of the common room and walked in. She found Maureen and Hugo, ran over and said, "Someone is missing in the school again. A Ravenclaw girl. When did it happen?" Hugo stopped writing and asked. Maureen's heart moved, and he asked tentatively, "Did she disappear the morning before yesterday?" Lily said in surprise, "How do you know?" Maureen shook his head. "I guessed." Lily looked at Maureen suspiciously. "You guess it right." "That's right, the day before yesterday, the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs had potions class together, and the freshman named Delia didn't go to class. I haven't seen her for 2 days now." Maureen was getting more and more surprised. Of course, he didn't guess, because the morning before yesterday, after he finished a History of Magic class, he was supposed to go to the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, but he inexplicably went back to the time before the History of Magic class, and once again experienced Professor Bin's lullaby-like class. Maureen was thinking about this question throughout the History of Magic class. He didn't understand why he would experience time again, and there was no sign when he went back to the past. He was sure that he hadn't moved anything. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. The last time he went back to the past, Mosby happened to be missing at that time. This time when he went back to the past, Delia from Ravenclaw also happened to be missing. Is it a coincidence or? Maureen put down her pen, puzzled by what happened to her. If the first time was a coincidence, what about the second time? Maureen, what are you thinking about? Lily asked curiously. Maureen hesitated for a long time, but still didn't say it out loud. Going back to the past was too unbelievable. If there was no solid evidence, it would be useless to say it out loud. No, I'm just wondering why that person disappeared, Maureen said. Don't think too much. It's probably another freshman who got lost. Hogwarts is so big. When I came back last night, I got lost near the library on the 5th floor. Fortunately, I met Nick, who was almost headless. Hugo said nonchalantly. Have you been doing homework all day? Let me see. Lily grabbed Hugo's Muggle Studies homework, glanced at the answers on it, and then laughed. Who told you that Muggle police are milkmen? Police and Aurors are the same, okay. Hugo and Maureen both sighed. Their answers were both wrong. Chapter 31 Circa Duggan. Delia from Ravenclaw did not disappear for long. She returned to the Ravenclaw common room shortly after Maureen and others discussed it. But like Mosby, who disappeared last time, she still lost her memory. Because the freshmen had just arrived at Hogwarts, and there was no substantial damage except for temporary amnesia, this matter did not attract everyone's attention. They just thought that the two freshmen were panicked and lost their memory because they could not find the way. Everyone thought so, but Maureen was the only one who cared about this matter very much. He always felt that this matter was not as simple as it seemed on the surface, especially the fact that he went back to the past, which could not be explained clearly until now. Maureen would go to the library to look up information whenever he had time. He now focused on the issue of time magic in the wizarding world. Time magic is a very profound content. Many wizards fantasize about being able to freely control time, change the past, and make up for regrets. However, the Ministry of Magic keeps a close watch on ancient magic objects such as time converters. In addition, the Ministry of Magic has always emphasized that the time converters have all been destroyed, so going back to the past has become a luxury for wizards. Maureen searched for a lot of information about time magic. The origin of the time converter is said to be created by a wizard named Hunlane. His wife was brutally killed by a black wizard when she was out. In order to save his wife, he invented the time converter, but his time converter could only go back 24 hours, and he still failed to save his wife. The book Incredible Magic tells a series of disasters caused by time converters. 3 people went back to the past and saw their past selves. They were regarded as fakes by their past selves using Polyjuice Potion, and were killed by themselves. Strange, all the time magic information shows that when you go back to the past, you will meet another self, but why do I go back to my own body when I go back to the past? Maureen sat by the window in the library and fell into deep thought. The sun shone in from the window and shone on him. He moved away and looked up inadvertently. Suddenly, he saw Sweet in the dark corner of the library. Sweet has not talked to them since the beginning of school. He always comes and goes alone. If it weren't for the fact that he often asked questions to the professor in class, everyone would almost think he was a mute. But what was different this time was that Sweet was not reading a book, but quietly staring at a boy. Maureen knew that boy, Jamie Leonard, a freshman in Gryffindor. He sat in front of Maureen in the last spell class and asked Maureen how to use the repair spell correctly. Sweet kept staring at Jamie, and his eyes never left. Jamie, who was doing his homework, didn't notice Sweet at all. Maureen didn't care at first. Half an hour later, when he went to see Sweet again, he found that Sweet was still staring at Jamie. What is he doing? Maureen was puzzled. It was not polite to stare at others all the time. Didn't Sweet understand this? While Maureen was puzzled, Jamie had already started to pack his school bag and was ready to leave the library. Sweet immediately stood up and followed Jamie away. Maureen hesitated for a moment. He always felt that Sweet was a bit mysterious. He wanted to see what Sweet was going to do, so he packed his things and followed them out. After Jamie left the library, he went straight to the Gryffindor common room, followed by Sweet and Maureen at a distance. They walked up the stairs and met many students on the way, so Jamie didn't realize that he was being followed by Sweet, and Sweet didn't see Maureen behind him. The Gryffindor common room was on the 8th floor, but Jamie went up to the 7th floor, and then walked along the corridor. After passing a black iron armor that often creaked, Jamie walked into a classroom. Jamie walked into the classroom from the front door, while Sweet walked in from the back door. He was sneaky and looked around to see if anyone noticed him. In order not to be discovered by Sweet, Maureen slowed down his pace a little. When Maureen walked up the stairs, there was no Jamie and Sweet in the corridor. Maureen quietly approached the classroom they had just entered. Maureen didn't know what this classroom was used for, but he also gently pushed open the back door of the classroom and glanced inside. The classroom was empty, no one was there. Maureen pushed open the door of the classroom in surprise. The classroom was piled with various cardboard boxes, desks were arranged in a mess, and it was filled with the smell of pine resin. Maureen looked around the whole classroom, but still didn't see Jamie and Sweet. How could it be? I just saw them both come in. Maureen frowned. It was less than a minute since Jamie and Sweet walked into the classroom, and Maureen also came in. Why did Jamie and Sweet disappear inexplicably in just such a 1-minute interval? Stop. Dirty and dirty coward, stop and fight me to the death. My great Sir Cadogan has even killed dragons, so how could I be afraid of a coward like you? A voice suddenly came from a portrait on the wall of the classroom. Maureen turned his head and found a picture frame on the wall depicting a meadow. A knight in armor was struggling to pull the reins of a fat gray horse. Only half of the gray horse was in the picture, and it seemed that it was going to graze somewhere else. The knight was about to drag it back to the picture. Sir Cadogan? Hello. Maureen watched with interest. Sir Cadogan wanted to ride on the horse, but the gray horse raised its hind hoof impatiently and kicked him out. Sir Cadogan's hat rolled out and fell on the grass, his body covered with grass. Don't laugh. You traitor, why did you move my portrait here? Raise your weapons quickly, let's have a fair duel. Sir Cadogan got up in a panic, put on his hat, and drew the sword from his waist and pointed it at Maureen. Sir Cadogan, did you see two people walk into this classroom just now? Although Maureen didn't know why Sir Cadogan came from, and didn't understand who moved his portrait here, he still asked politely. Coward. Sir Cadogan raised his head proudly. I am a brave knight, not your sentinel, and I refuse to provide any information to you, a traitor. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Maureen looked at Sir Cadogan helplessly. This knight looked a little crazy. He thought for a while and said, answer my questions and I will duel with you. Sir Cadogan said, no, you came in alone. Okay, duel with me. I came in alone? Are you sure? Maureen asked. Nonsense. I swear in the name of Sir Cadogan, you came in alone just now. Draw your sword quickly. I will judge you in the name of the knight and execute you on the spot. Sir Cadogan tried to ride the gray horse again, but the gray horse kicked him out again. Maureen was puzzled. Did he really see it wrong? Just when he was about to ask again, his eyes suddenly began to shake again, and then everything around him began to turn upside down. A figure in the light flashed past him, and when he came to his senses, he was sitting in the library again. Chapter 32 Unexpected. Maureen opened his eyes wide in astonishment. He went back to the past again. This was the third time he went back to the past. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the place where Sweet was sitting just now. Sure enough, he saw Sweet staring at Jamie intently, while Jamie was writing his homework without noticing. If one person disappears every time he goes back to the past, does that mean that another person is missing this time? Maureen remembered the freshman Mosby who disappeared the first time. When Mosby appeared, he was also on the 7th floor. Sweet was also on the 7th floor at that time. Just now, Jamie and Sweet also went to the 7th floor. Is this really a coincidence? The more Maureen thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong. When he followed Sweet and Jamie to the classroom on the 7th floor, Sweet and Jamie mysteriously disappeared in that classroom. This obviously didn't make sense. Was there something strange in that classroom or something wrong? He glanced at Sweet. Sweet was still staring at Jamie. That expression was really weird. Maureen stood up without hesitation and walked out of the library. Since he has returned to the past, it means that what happened just now will happen again. What he needs to do now is to go to the strange classroom in advance and wait for Sweet and Jamie to arrive. Maureen quickly ran to the 7th floor and came to the original classroom. He carefully opened the door of the classroom. The classroom was still the original classroom. There were all kinds of things in the utility room. The crazy Sir Cadogan on the wall challenged him again. Stop. You sneaky thief, come and fight me happily, I will spare your life. Sir Cadogan shouted while waving his dagger. Maureen had no time to pay attention to him. He stood behind a pile of boxes to block his body so that he would not be discovered. Then he stared at the door of the classroom through the gap, and then took out his pocket watch and calculated the time. If things were really as he thought, then Sweet and Jamie should walk into this classroom later. Time passed by minute. Maureen expected that the two of them should be here soon. He looked at the classroom with bated breath. Sir Cadogan went to fight with a grey horse because Maureen ignored him, and was kicked several times by the horse's hoof. Just before Maureen returned to the past, Maureen opened the door before Sweet and Jamie, and according to the prediction, Sweet and Jamie should also approach the classroom. Maureen stared at the door of the classroom nervously. He wanted to know why Sweet and Jamie disappeared after opening the door. Is there anything special about this classroom? However, the time Maureen expected has arrived, but Sweet and Jamie did not open the door as expected. No one came in. Only Sir Cadogan on the wall was humming and singing a song that Maureen could not understand. What's going on? They should be here. Maureen was puzzled. Is the time wrong? But this is impossible. Since Maureen went back to the past, he has been very sensitive to time and it is impossible for him to miscalculate the time. But why didn't Sweet and Jamie come in? He had an uneasy thought in his mind. He quickly moved to the door, opened the door of the classroom, and glanced into the corridor. The corridor was empty, and Sweet and Jamie didn't come. He immediately ran to the library, and there was no trace of Sweet and Jamie in the library. Maureen was sure that what happened just now was not an illusion, but he was confused. If he really went back to the past, why did things go differently from what they did just now? It was not like this the first two times he went back to the past. The first time he did play a trick on Peeves with James and the others, and the second time he actually listened to a lesson of history of magic again. What's wrong? Maureen pondered all the way back to the Gryffindor common room. Not long after he came back, Hugo pushed open the door of the common room and walked in, cursing. What's wrong? Hugo. Maureen saw that Hugo was wet and his robe was dripping with water. Hugo didn't like the library. He just went to the playground to watch Quidditch training. Peeves. Hugo said angrily, he's at odds with me. He's been looking for revenge these past 2 days. He just dumped a bucket on my head. Ever since James and the others played a trick on Peeves, Peeves didn't look for James and Albus, but for Hugo because he was afraid of James and Albus ghost glue. This was the 5th time Hugo was tricked by Peeves. Maureen drew out his wand, pointed at Hugo's wet robe, and said, water disappears. Steam came out of Hugo's robe and then disappeared into the air. What a practical spell. I must learn it. Hugo said enviously. This was no less than 30 times that he said he wanted to learn Maureen's spells, but unfortunately he was very hesitant in using many spells. By the way, why didn't Peeves look for you? James and Albus knew how to deal with Peeves. It would be fine if Peeves didn't look for them, but why didn't he look for you? Didn't you play a trick on him last time? Hugo said indignantly. Maureen also found it strange. He hadn't seen Peeves since he played a trick on him last time. Every time Peeves played tricks on Hugo, it was when he was alone. He had never been played tricked when he was with Maureen. Maybe Peeves thought you were easier to bully. Maureen sat back in his chair. He didn't care much about Peeves. He wanted to know where Sweet and Jamie were now more than Peeves. Have you seen Sweet and Jamie? Maureen asked. Why are you looking for that Sweet? I've only met that guy a few times. Hugo shook his head, then remembered something, and said with shining eyes, but speaking of which, I just heard something. The Quidditch team is going to select substitutes this Saturday. Even freshmen can participate in the substitutes. Do you want to try? Substitutes? The school's Quidditch team has substitutes. Maureen was surprised. He knew that there were substitutes in regular team games. Quidditch games can only end when the golden snitch is caught. Sometimes the game can last for several days, and the players need to be replaced to sleep. But the games at Hogwarts are small games, and substitutes are rarely used. The latest novels are first published on the 6th book bar. Yes, in the final between Gryffindor and Slytherin last year, the Seekers of both teams collided with each other on the field and were both hospitalized. Without the Seekers, the game could not be finished. Later, the keepers of both teams temporarily acted as Seekers. After 12 hours of the game, the Slytherin keeper finally caught the golden snitch and won the game. James said that Slytherin was lucky and the golden snitch flew into the hands of the Slytherin keeper. Hugo said regretfully. James and Albus are also on the school team. Both James and Albus are beaters. To prevent the same situation from happening this year, the school allows each college to select substitute players, and first-year students can also participate. The chances of playing are not great, but next year, After the 7th year students leave school, they can become regulars. You can try to sign up. Hugo suggested. That's okay. Maureen replied casually, but he was still thinking about what happened just now. Chapter 33, Disapparition Spell. Jamie disappeared. Everyone found out when no one answered the roll call in the charms class. Does anyone know where Jamie Leonard went? I didn't receive his leave note. Professor Flitwick asked while sitting on a pile of books. No one answered. No one knew where Jamie had gone. Maureen was slightly surprised. He immediately looked at the inconspicuous seat in the corner. Sweet was looking down at his textbook, and didn't seem to care about Jamie at all. What's going on? Maureen's doubts became stronger and stronger. He was now sure that every time he went back to the past, someone would disappear for no reason. So, are these two things related? Why did Sweet keep staring at Jamie yesterday? Could Jamie's disappearance really be related to Sweet? It's probably another lost one. I bet he'll show up again tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Hugo muttered. No matter what, I need to be responsible for everyone's safety. I will ask your headmaster, Professor Kane, to see if he forgot to give me Jamie's leave note. Professor Flitwick took out a pen and wrote a line of words on the parchment, then tapped the parchment with his wand, and the parchment automatically folded into a paper crane, flapping its wings and flying out of the classroom to find Professor Kane, the headmaster of Gryffindor. Okay, everyone except Jamie is here, so let's start the class. Today we are going to practice the Disapparition Charm, how to move things. This is a very practical spell. After learning this spell, you can easily move heavy things to where you want. This is different from the levitation charm. Maureen, I think you have mastered this spell, right? Come and show it to everyone. Professor Flitwick looked at Maureen with a smile. Maureen's talent in all magic courses has been demonstrated, and he has been praised by many teachers, except perhaps Professor Sinistra and Professor Charles. You can move anyone's book at will, and let everyone see how far your spell can be cast. Professor Flitwick said. Different people have different levels of control over magic. The farther the distance of magic, the more advanced a magic. Okay, Professor. Maureen really mastered the spell. He stood on the podium, looked at Sweet, and waved his wand. The book on Sweet's desk moved towards him. Sweet raised his head and looked at Maureen indifferently. Then he also pulled out his wand and tried to get his book back, but failed. Bring the book here. Sweet said expressionlessly. Maureen let Sweet's book go around the classroom before returning it to him. He looked at Sweet meaningfully and was going to find Sweet after class to ask him where he had taken Jamie. Very good, very good. Maureen's transfiguration charm is very beautiful. Not only can he move a book, but he can also use the transfiguration charm 10 meters away. It's rare. Professor Flitwick looked very satisfied and motioned Maureen to sit back. The other students also looked at Maureen with envy. The limit for them was to move a piece of paper 1 meter long, but Maureen could make a book go around the classroom. This was indeed something they could not compare to. Dude, how did you think of moving Sweet's book? He doesn't look very happy. Hugo leaned over and whispered. He sits farthest from the podium. Maureen shrugged his shoulders. Wes sat in the back corner of the classroom in every class. Professor Flitwick asked him to move the farthest book, so he naturally chose West. As soon as he finished speaking, the book on his textbook suddenly flew up and flew to the back. Maureen turned his head and found that Sweet was pointing his wand at his book. Sweet looked at Maureen calmly. He and Maureen were sitting about 3 meters apart, and he could also use the Disapparition charm to move a book. He seems to be fighting with you, Maureen. Take the book. Hugo was going to use his wand to help Maureen, but he remembered that he could only move half a piece of paper 3 centimeters, and he often accidentally ignited the paper, so he held back. Maureen stretched out his wand, took back the half-flying book, and looked at Sweet calmly. Sweet did not try to fight with Maureen for the book again. He failed to win Maureen twice, so he realized that his transfiguration spell was not as good as Maureen's, and just took back his wand coldly. Everyone was practicing the transfiguration spell throughout the spell class. Maureen had already started to learn other spells, but his mind was not on learning spells, but on thinking about Jamie. What are you thinking about? Lily asked. She was able to move a piece of paper and was now trying to move a book, but the book only moved a little and then fell back on the desk. Maureen shook his head. He did not intend to tell others what he had found out, because there was not enough evidence to prove that Jamie's disappearance was related to Sweet, and he could not say whether it was right for him to go back to the past. Soon the get out of class was over. The next class was Transfiguration, but there was half an hour in between. Maureen asked Hugo and Lily to go first. He used the excuse that he had to discuss the key points of the repair spell with Professor Flitwick and stayed behind. Then he stopped Sweet when Sweet was about to leave the classroom. "Get out of the way," Sweet said simply. Maureen did not let him go. "Where did Jamie go?" "The latest novels are published on the 6th grade of the 6th grade. Sweet raised his eyebrows, glanced at Maureen, and said, "The legs are on his body. It's his business where he wants to go. Don't play dumb. I saw you staring at him in the library yesterday. You also followed him out of the library. He disappeared after leaving the library. Do you know something hidden?" Maureen must figure this out, not only for the missing freshman, but also for himself. Every time someone went missing, he would go back to the past. His intuition told him that this matter was not that simple. Sweet looked at Maureen with strange eyes, and then said indifferently, "Just take care of your own business." Then he walked around Maureen, left the charms classroom without looking back, and walked towards the Transfiguration classroom. Maureen looked at Sweet's back. He didn't care about Sweet's indifferent attitude towards people, but he felt that Jamie's disappearance must be related to Sweet. Maybe he also knew something about the disappearance of Mosby and Delia the previous 2 times. Thinking of Sweet's strange behavior of getting up early and returning late, and never communicating with roommates, Maureen became more and more curious about Sweet. "It seems that we have to investigate Sweet." Maureen wanted to investigate this matter clearly. Chapter 34 Gryffinder's Thief. If you want to keep an eye on Sweet's movements at any time, there is a very simple way: the Marauder's Map. The Marauder's Map can show the movements of all the teachers and students of Hogwarts at any time, and where Sweet goes can also be seen in the Marauder's Map. When Maureen returned to the common room at night, she went to find James again. But James and Albus were sitting in the corner, looking a little annoyed. "James, Albus, what's wrong? You two?" Maureen asked. James took a big bite of the cake and said, "Someone broke into my dormitory and stole my folding box of jokes." "Someone stole things?" Maureen was surprised. "When did it happen?" "Last night when I was having dinner. I returned to the dormitory and was about to take the jokes from the folding box, but I found it was gone," James said, distressed. His folding box is much more informative than Hugo's folding box, and it has all kinds of Weasley products. "Apart from the folding box, is there anything else missing?" Maureen asked. "It's just the folding box. Albus's is missing too. It must have been done by one of our Gryffindors. Albus and I sell magic jokes to everyone here every day, and some people are jealous." James was very angry. He and Albus were agents of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, secretly helping George sell things in school, but this time it was obvious that they suffered a great loss. "Should we report it to Professor Kane?" Maureen said. Professor Kane, who taught the Transfiguration class, was the head of their Gryffindor school. Maureen felt it necessary to tell the head of the school about this. Albus shook his head. "We brought those things secretly in the first place. Telling the head of the school would only bring trouble to ourselves. Many products of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes are banned in Hogwarts. The school would not welcome vomit, nougat and quick-acting skipping candy to enter the campus to make students skip classes by all means, because the lost items were not valuables. If the head of the school knew about it, they would probably be put in detention." "Then what about the Marauder's Map?" Maureen asked hesitantly. "It's also lost. I've been keeping the Marauder's Map in a folding box." James stood up and scanned everyone in the common room. His eyes flashed with anger. "I want to see who stole my things, stole my treasures. You dare to use them in the Gryffindor common room. I'll catch you in the act." James was right. No one was more familiar with the merchandise of Weasley's Hocus Pocus than him. If someone suddenly had so many things that didn't belong to him in a short period of time, it would definitely arouse suspicion. "Do you think it could be Peeves?" Albus doubted. They had a conflict with Peeves long ago. "I asked the fat lady. It's not Peeves. Although ghosts can pass through walls, if they hold something in their hands, the thing can't follow them through the wall. He can only go through the door." The fat lady said Peeves didn't go out of the entrance of the common room. James denied this possibility. There are many Gryffindor students coming in and out of the common room every day. The fat lady may not be able to remember so many students, but if there is a ghost that doesn't take the usual route, she will definitely know. James and Albus's Weasley folding trunks were stolen, and Maureen could no longer use the Marauder's Map to monitor Sweet. He now had to find another way to investigate Sweet's relationship with the missing students. When Hugo came back and heard that James and Albus's magic jokes were stolen, he hurried back to his dormitory. Fortunately, his folding trunk was still there. Who do you think would want to steal the Weasley folding trunk? Hugo counted his magic jokes carefully and felt relieved. Those fun things will always be wanted by someone. James and Albus sell them every day. It's too conspicuous. It's not surprising that they are targeted. Maureen said while sitting on the bed. Fortunately, I am not as ostentatious as they are. They can only suffer in silence about this matter. James and Albus secretly discussed with Uncle George about becoming agents of Weasley's trickster in the school. If their parents knew about it, they would probably send several howlers to the school. Hugo said last time that he also wanted to help Weasley's trickster sell things to make some extra money, but his mother Hermione had foresight and went directly to threaten George, so George excluded Hugo. Without the Marauder's map, Maureen decided to investigate Sweet himself. He wanted to find out why Sweet left the dormitory so early every morning, what was the purpose of doing so, and whether it was related to the missing students. Sweet came back very late at night as usual. As soon as he came back, he climbed into bed and pulled down the curtains of the bed without talking to anyone. Maureen secretly drank some brain wakeners after everyone fell asleep. This was brewed during the potion class last week. Professor Theodore asked them to prepare this refreshing potion, which can keep them awake when they are about to fall asleep in class. Maureen did not sleep all night and waited until about 3 o'clock in the morning. Suddenly, he heard a slight movement in the dormitory. Maureen pretended to be asleep in bed, turned over and secretly looked at Sweet's bed. Sweet had gotten up and packed his things, folded the quilt, put on his school bag, and then left the dormitory. His movements were very quiet. If Maureen had not been paying attention to him, he would probably not have heard his footsteps. The latest novels are first published on the 6th grade book bar. After Sweet left the dormitory, Maureen quickly got up and secretly followed him. The lights in the common room flickered. I'm afraid few Gryffindor students got up so early. Maureen heard the door of the common room click slightly. Sweet had obviously left the common room. Maureen walked down the stairs and followed closely. When he opened the door, the fat lady was sleeping on the table in the portrait and mumbling. She didn't know who had left. It was very dark at this time. The stars in the sky were still twinkling. The lights in the castle were also flickering and could go out at any time. Sweet's figure walked hurriedly in the dark. He walked down the stairs of the castle and then left the castle. It's past 3 in the morning. Where is he going after leaving the castle? Maureen followed behind Sweet, keeping a distance. When he walked past the stairs, the people in the portraits hanging next to the stairs were snoring softly, and no one noticed him. Sweet quietly pushed open the gate of the castle and walked along the path towards the Forbidden Forest. There's a stone house next to the Forbidden Forest. That is Hagrid's house. Sweet did not go to Hagrid's house, but turned a corner and walked into the Forbidden Forest. Why would he go to the Forbidden Forest? Maureen hesitated. At the beginning of the school year, Principal McGonagall reminded everyone not to go to the Forbidden Forest. Prefect Nelson and others also warned the first-year students that there were many dangerous things in the Forbidden Forest and that students were forbidden to enter. So, Sweet got up so early every morning just to go to the Forbidden Forest? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35, Dangerous Forbidden Forest. No matter how weird Sweet was, he was still a freshman. How could he dare to come to the Forbidden Forest every morning? Maureen hesitated. Although the Forbidden Forest was said to be dangerous, he was not a coward. If Sweet dared to go to the Forbidden Forest every morning, then he would not be afraid of anything. He followed Sweet and walked into the lush Forbidden Forest. The stars in the sky could be vaguely discerned between the treetops. The surroundings were extremely quiet, with only the rustling sound of the breeze blowing through the branches. The road was barely passable at the beginning, but after walking for 5 minutes, the thick tree roots on the ground were intertwined, and it became more and more difficult to walk. Sweet seemed to be very familiar with this section of the road. He crossed the hillside and bypassed the stones in the forest with ease, and soon disappeared in front of Maureen. Maureen also followed Sweet's route, but when he bypassed the stones in the forest, he found that Sweet had disappeared. How could it be? Where did he go? Maureen looked around. He had just seen Sweet walking here, but when Maureen was only about 10 seconds behind, Sweet disappeared. Maureen walked over the stone and looked at the road ahead. The forest had grown denser and denser from here, with lush branches and leaves, almost covering the sky. He didn't know if it was Maureen's illusion or something, but he felt that the sky was getting darker. But this was not normal. It was early morning, and the sky would only get brighter. Maureen pulled out his wand and gently called fluorescent flash. The wand emitted light to illuminate the surroundings. He continued to walk forward for a while, but still didn't see Sweet. He lost Sweet again. This was the second time Maureen lost Sweet. Just yesterday, he and Sweet went to the abandoned classroom on the 7th floor and lost Sweet. When Maureen was thinking about whether to continue walking deeper into the forbidden forest, suddenly there was a rapid sound of breaking through the air from the treetops behind him, as if something was crossing the night sky. Maureen quickly turned around, hid behind a tree, and looked behind him. In the night sky, he saw a big bird flying over the treetops. Because it was too dark, Maureen couldn't see clearly what kind of bird it was, but he felt it was an owl, but much larger than an owl. The big bird quickly disappeared, and then there was a burst of bird calls in the woods, as if many birds were awakened, and they all flew to the sky with a cry. Then Maureen heard a low hissing sound from the depths of the forbidden forest, as if an animal was calling out in dissatisfaction, and then the sound of hooves stomping on the ground sounded in the woods. There's something strange here. Maureen frowned. He didn't know this place, and it was unwise to break in like this. As for where Sweet was, he couldn't say. If Sweet came here every day, then Sweet knew what was going on here better than Maureen. He knew how to deal with this situation, but Maureen didn't know. Maureen decided to leave here first, but before he walked far, a vine at his feet suddenly jumped over and wrapped around Maureen's ankle, tripping him. Maureen felt that his body had lost its center of gravity, and was caught by the vine and dragged backwards. Petrification. Maureen raised his wand with all his strength and shot it at the vine at his feet. As a wizard, encountering moving vines was not surprising. He knew that there was a kind of devil vine in the wizarding world that would entangle its prey, but he didn't expect that this kind of devil vine also existed in the forbidden forest. The petrification spell hit the devil vine, and the devil vine paused for a while. Maureen struggled to pull his feet out, but at this time the devil vine had started to wriggle again and continued to grab him. With the help of the fluorescent light of the wand, Maureen suddenly realized that it was not a devil vine at all, but the tentacles of a tentacle monster. The tentacle monster is something between an animal and a plant. It is a plant because it has roots, grows on the ground, and can absorb fertilizer. It is an animal because it also has a mouth and can shout. Its teeth can bite prey, and it can even bleed after being cut. Maureen had seen this kind of thing in a book in the library last time. The forbidden forest is really a dangerous place. Maureen jumped onto a large rock. He did not see the whole picture of the tentacle monster, but only saw a tentacle reaching out to him. Maureen shouted frozen 3 feet, and the cold air fell on the tentacle monster. The tentacle shrank, began to spasm, and then quickly retracted. Fortunately, I know that this kind of thing is afraid of cold. Maureen breathed a sigh of relief, pointed his wand at the branch next to him, and said apparition. The branch was bent by his apparition spell and moved in front of him. He stepped on the branch and climbed up the tree, then climbed up a distance and looked around from a high place, trying to find Sweet's figure. But there was no one in the forbidden forest, and Sweet was not seen. Where did he go? Should he be okay? Maureen pondered for a moment. He had decided to leave the forbidden forest. There were too many dangerous creatures in the forbidden forest. Tentacle monsters like this one that could move were enough to threaten freshmen. No wonder the school always repeatedly warned students not to go to the forbidden forest. But just as he was climbing down the tree trunk, something suddenly jumped into his arms and grabbed his clothes tightly. After he stepped on the ground, he looked down and found that it was a very cute squirrel. At least he thought it was a squirrel at first glance. This little guy was only half the size of a palm, with snow white fur all over his body, a big tail swinging back and forth, and a pair of eyes that were the same as Maureen's, blue on the left and green on the right, like crystal clear gems. Hey, your eyes are the same as mine. Maureen was as happy as if he had discovered a new world. The little guy who suddenly jumped into his arms also had heterochromatic pupils, which made him feel inexplicably kind. You know, different eye colors have always been a problem for Maureen. The little guy stretched out his little claws and firmly grasped Maureen's clothes, rubbing against them affectionately. looking very satisfied. So what species are you? Maureen found that the little guy was not a squirrel. Although it had a big tail of a squirrel, it did not have other characteristics of a squirrel. Its body was pure and made people love it. The little guy shook his tail and climbed onto Maureen's shoulder. Although I don't know what you are, you should go home, and I have to go back to school, Maureen said. The little guy once again grabbed Maureen's clothes and refused to let go. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. You want to follow me? Maureen asked hesitantly. The little guy shook his tail again. This is really a strange feeling. Maureen didn't know how to deal with this guy, but because its eyes were the same as Maureen's, it was a wonderful fate for Maureen, and he did plan to take this guy with him. Maureen walked back along the original path. After leaving the Forbidden Forest, the sky was already light. The little guy lay on his shoulder and looked around curiously. Maureen walked into the castle when no one was paying attention. When he came to the door of the common room, he woke up the sleeping fat lady. The fat lady seemed very unhappy to be woken up, but still let him in. He planned to find time to go to the library to find out what this little guy was. Chapter 36 Invisible Doi. How can you not see it? It's in my hand, Maureen said in confusion. He showed Hugo this strange little guy on the way to wake him up for breakfast, but what puzzled Maureen was that Hugo didn't see this snow-white little guy at all. Hugo looked at Maureen's empty hands strangely, then glanced at Maureen and said, "Mullen, what nonsense are you talking about? Didn't you sleep well last night? There's nothing in your hand." Maureen still didn't understand. The little guy was clearly in his hand, still wagging his tail comfortably. How could Hugo not see it? Was Hugo joking with him? "Lily, tell me if this little guy is cute." Maureen turned his head and said to Lily. Lily reached out and touched Maureen's forehead with a puzzled look on her face. "You don't have a fever. Why are you talking nonsense so early in the morning? Did you eat something and have hallucinations?" Lily didn't even see the little guy in Maureen's hand. Maureen was confused. Hugo and Lily didn't look like they were joking. They were looking at him with worry, thinking that Maureen had taken the wrong potion and was hallucinating. Maureen was 100% sure that he was not hallucinating because the furry feeling on his hand was too real. When the little guy grabbed him, his clothes wrinkled. "Touch it, it's in my hand," Maureen said. Hugo and Lily looked at each other, and finally Hugo tentatively reached out to touch Maureen's palm, but didn't touch it, because the little guy didn't seem to like Hugo, and quickly dodged and jumped onto Maureen's shoulder to prevent Hugo from touching it. "I didn't touch anything," Hugo said. "That's because it's now crawling onto my shoulder." Maureen wanted Hugo to touch the little guy to prove that it was not an illusion, but the little guy just refused. Hugo touched his stomach and said, "Oh, never mind, I'm so hungry, I'm going to have breakfast first." Maureen didn't know how to convince Hugo and Lily, so he could only go to the hall to eat first. The breakfast was very rich. When Maureen was about to take an omelette, the little guy suddenly jumped on a piece of toast and started to eat it. Seeing the bread gradually decreasing, Maureen immediately found evidence to prove the existence of the little guy. He pointed at the bread and said, "Look at the bread." Lily and Hugo looked at the teeth marks on the bread in surprise. The teeth marks became more and more, and the bread became less and less. It was clearly an animal eating the bread. "It's really there." Hugo stretched out his hand to the piece of bread, but the little guy quickly dodged and jumped onto another sandwich. Maureen felt much better. At least the bread proved that it was not his hallucination. But a new question arose. Why was he the only one who could see this guy? Lily frowned, thinking of something, and said, "Maureen, I don't know how to explain this to you, but you were also born in a wizard family. You should know that being able to see things that others can't see is not a good thing. Yes, you should have heard of the Thestrals, right? They are animals that can only see after seeing dead people. There are such animals in Hogwarts. My father said that seeing the Thestrals is not a good thing, and he can see it too," Hugo said. Hugo's father is Ron, who participated in the Battle of Hogwarts 21 years ago and saw many wizards die in the battle. It is natural for him to see the Thestrals. "You didn't bring back a newborn Thestrals, did you?" Lily and Hugo looked at Maureen with sympathy. A wizard who can see the Thestrals means that he has seen death before. Lily and Hugo thought that Maureen's family had died at some point. Maureen was both amused and confused. "I have never seen death. No one has died in front of me. If there's, it is only ants and spiders." He was sure that he had never seen anyone die in front of him. Before going to school, His life was normal. But how do you explain that you see things that others cannot see? That is not a good sign, Hugo said worriedly. Maureen didn't know how to answer Hugo. This matter was indeed very strange. Doy. The little guy ate another sandwich and made a comfortable sound. Obviously, no one except Maureen could hear what the little guy said. Then you might as well call it Doy. Maureen didn't know what name to give the little guy, so he simply called it Oi based on its strange cry. This is really a strange feeling. You actually named the air. Hugo shook his head. When they went to class, Maureen saw Sweet sitting in the corner again. They went to the Forbidden Forest together in the morning. Sweet disappeared in the Forbidden Forest and now sat in the classroom safely. You said he went to the Forbidden Forest this morning? But we are forbidden to go there. I heard there are big spiders there, spiders as big as houses. Hugo glanced at Sweet secretly, and Maureen told Hugo everything that happened in the morning. I didn't see a big spider, but I saw a tentacle monster that jumped out from nowhere. Fortunately, I repelled it. The latest novel is first published on the 6th book bar. Maureen touched Doy's head on the desk, and Doy chirped again. Its cry was childish and very crisp, but the strange thing was that except Maureen, no one could see or hear it, not even Professor Francis of Defense Against the Dark Arts. You are so brave. You dare to go to the Forbidden Forest so early in the morning. But what does Sweet do in the Forbidden Forest every day? Pray. Hugo asked puzzled. Maureen didn't know either. He felt that there were more and more mysteries surrounding Sweet. Those missing people seemed to be related not only to him, but also to his suspicious behavior every morning. Their attention was soon drawn to Professor Francis, who was using a threatening way to tell them what dangerous animals would bite them to death if they crossed the swamp. Everyone listened attentively, mainly because they had to listen carefully because of the atmosphere of death at any time. Professor Francis was very good at teaching defense against the dark arts. The swamp has become one of the places I don't want to set foot in from now on. After class, Hugo added another item to his list of forbidden places of death. Every time after defense against the dark arts, Hugo would record the places or things that might cause the inexplicable death of wizards and remind himself not to set foot on them. Last week, he recorded a clear pond and a pitch-black feather pen. There was a water monster in the pond that would suck the water out of a person's body and turn the unlucky person into a dried-up person, and the pitch-black feather pen would die once it wrote its own name. Last time, Maureen saw Hugo throw a quill made of a black swan's feather into the trash can, and decided not to touch a black quill again. Hugo, don't scare yourself. If the wizarding world is so dangerous, we would have died many times, right? Professor Francis only talked about some special cases, which doesn't mean that there is danger of life at any time and anywhere. Maureen said. What if we are in a special case? Hugo decided 2 weeks ago not to eat potatoes again. There is a kind of poisonous flower fruit that looks exactly like a potato. Once eaten by mistake, flowers will grow on your hands. If you don't treat it in time, your life will be in danger. Maureen shook his head helplessly. With Professor Francis's death-threatening teaching method, Hugo learned defense against the dark arts very well, of course, theoretical knowledge, and Hugo's wand would still catch fire from time to time when he was talking about spells. Chapter 37, Substitute Selection. During the weekend, in order to find out what species the Doy he picked up belonged to, Maureen went to the library to find a book called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and looked for clues in the column of animals that can become invisible. First, he ruled out the possibility that Doy was a young thestral. When the thestrals were born, they looked similar to adult thestrals. The thestrals were not very good looking, with skinny bodies, gray fur, and a pair of wings, which was completely different from Doy. The thestrals can only be considered half-invisible animals, and their invisibility is quite special. The book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them records 7 animals that can become invisible, and their birth and habits are clearly described, such as the invisible wolf and invisible unicorn, which are often used by wizards to make invisible cloaks. However, no matter which animal it is impossible to remain invisible continuously. They can only become invisible when danger comes or when hunting. Continuous invisibility is a great burden for them. However, Doy is not one of the 7 invisible animals. It is difficult to tell what kind of invisible species it is, and it is also unclear why only Maureen can see it. This is too incredible. Doy's identity cannot be found in the book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, so Maureen went to look for other things about animals in the wizarding world. There are many books about animals in the library, But Maureen couldn't find it after searching for a whole morning. "What kind of little guy are you?" Maureen touched Doi sleeping on the book, and was full of doubts. Doi covered her body with her fluffy big tail and stretched out her pink little paws comfortably. Her paws were fleshy and the hair had not grown yet. "Have you found what your weird invisible pet is?" Hugo asked as he ran into the library. Maureen shook his head. "Forget it if you haven't found it, let's go," Hugo urged. "Where are you going?" "Quidditch. Gryffindor is going to select Quidditch substitutes this afternoon. You don't want to miss the Quidditch substitutes, right?" Hugo said excitedly. Maureen then remembered that Hugo had mentioned the Quidditch substitute last time. He immediately packed up his things, put Doi on his shoulders, and then ran to the Quidditch field with Hugo. There were already many people gathered at the Quidditch field of Hogwarts, basically all Gryffindor students, and some Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff students were joining in the fun. During the summer vacation this year, 2 members of the Gryffindor team graduated and left the team, so today they mainly selected 2 regular members, a seeker and a chaser, and the remaining 3 substitutes were selected for the lower grades, and first-year students were also allowed to participate. When Maureen arrived, many people had already gathered around the field, and many freshmen were eager to try. Lily was among them. She borrowed James and Albus's Firebolt 15. "Oh, no, I don't have a flying broom. I have to borrow one from the school." Maureen looked at the Firebolt 15 model with envy. First-year freshmen were not allowed to bring flying brooms, and he didn't buy one. "I'll lend you Albus's Firebolt 15 first." Lily threw the broom to Maureen. "What about Hugo?" Maureen asked. Hugo shook his head. "Forget it. It's one thing to like Quidditch, and it's another to go up and play by myself. I don't want to be hit by Lily and have bruises all over my face. That shows that my skills are good. I can hit whatever I point at," Lily said proudly. The captain of Gryffindor Quidditch is the 6th grade student Poker, a burly and tall boy. He shouted loudly to maintain order in the Quidditch field. First, he selected the official team members. He asked the students who participated in the selection to fly around the field shoulder to shoulder. Soon, when turning a corner, several people did not control the speed of the flying broom and were left behind. These people were directly eliminated. Then Poker stretched out his wand and sent out several red marks in the air of Quidditch, winding and asking everyone to fly along the marks within 10 seconds. Those who failed to meet the requirements were directly eliminated. This is to test the control and flying speed of the broomsticks. This is a great move. Those marked routes are not so easy to complete, Hugo exclaimed. "Are we going to do this later?" Maureen asked. "The requirements for substitutes should be looser, right? Substitutes are just familiar with the game and will not really play," Lily replied. "Even if they can't play, it's not bad to be a substitute. They can participate in Quidditch training at ordinary times, and they can be directly converted to regular members in the 2nd year and officially participate in the game." Many freshmen cherish this opportunity. Poker quickly selected a chaser and a seeker. They are both 4th-year students, and their flying performance is the best among all the participants. "Very good, now start selecting substitutes. Only 1st-year to 3rd-year students are allowed to participate." Poker called Maureen and others over, and then drove away a 4th-year student who wanted to fish in troubled waters. There were 20 substitutes, and everyone looked a little nervous, especially the 1st-year freshmen, who had only taken a few Quidditch flying classes and were not actually proficient in the skills. "Lily, try your best. If you can make the team will be contracted by our family," James said with a smile. "Shut up, James. I won't be extra accommodating," Pork said. The latest novels are first released on the 69th book bar. Lily was very confident. Her parents were both members of the school team when they were in school. The flying gene was inherited in their family. Both James and Albus had first-class flying skills. Maureen held the Firebolt 15, which was one of the best flying brooms at the moment. He was very calm about this matter. He was not worried about his first-year competitors, because after several flying lessons, he found that no one could fly better than him. His main competitors were the 2nd and 3rd years, who were much more experienced than him. Today was not a good day. It was cloudy, there was no sun, and there was a strong wind, which would cause obstacles to flying. Suddenly, Maureen saw Sweet in the crowd. Sweet was also holding a broomstick borrowed from the school and preparing to participate in the selection. Lily and Maureen looked at each other in surprise. Since the beginning of the school year, Sweet has basically asked for leave for every flying class. Everyone guessed that Sweet was afraid of heights and was afraid to ride a broomstick. Since Madam Hooch did not deliberately emphasize Sweet's absence, the matter was left unresolved. But Sweet, who had never taken a flying class, appeared on the Quidditch field to participate in the Quidditch selection. This was really strange. Isn't he afraid of heights? Has his fear of heights been cured? Lily asked Maureen in a low voice. Maureen was puzzled. Sweet was a person that no one could guess through. Chapter 38 Quidditch Tryouts. Many first-year students also discovered Sweet's existence and talked about him, but Sweet just stood there silently, waiting for Poke's instructions. Poke divided them into groups, and Sweet happened to be assigned to Maureen's group. Sweet still stared at Maureen with a strange look, and Maureen also looked at Sweet with a suspicious look. Although the missing Jamie stumbled back to the Gryffindor common room the next day, with no other injuries except forgetting where he went, Maureen began to suspect Sweet after seeing Sweet staring at Jamie for an afternoon and following Jamie in the library. Not to mention that Sweet got up so early every day to go to the Forbidden Forest. A series of strange things happen every day in the wizarding world. Even the professors at Hogwarts don't care too much about the occasional disappearance of first-year students for a day, because the freshmen reappeared quickly and were not substantially harmed. But Maureen was far from thinking that this matter was as simple as he thought, especially every time someone disappeared. He went back to the past once, which was really weird. The substitutes are tested on their flying ability and reaction ability. You fly around these pillars. Poker used his magic wand to conjure up 20 pieces of wood, each about 10 meters long, arranged in a row, 2 meters apart. This obstacle flight is relatively simple, but it can cause great trouble for some people with poor flying skills. Everyone flew along the pillars at different heights. Maureen easily shuttled between the pillars. Flying was not difficult for him, and he left everyone behind in an instant. Except for one person. When Maureen stopped at the finish line, he found that Sweet had also reached the finish line, only 2 seconds behind him. Lily was the third to arrive. Very good, you three did a good job. Poker nodded approvingly. Maureen was very surprised. It was okay for Lily to fly well, but why did Sweet, who had never taken a flying class, fly so well, and even faster than Lily? The most important thing is that Maureen and Lily's brooms are both first-class Firebolt 15 models, while Sweet's broom is the school's Nimbus series, which is far from comparable to the Firebolt. Although the role of the broom is not that different in obstacle flight, after all, the Nimbus series can be compared with a Firebolt in terms of cornering performance, but even so, Sweet is only a little behind Maureen. How much more does this guy have to hide? Maureen looked at Sweet. And Sweet was also looking at Maureen with a hint of provocation in his eyes. They tested the reaction ability of the substitutes one by one, giving each person a bat, and a total of 10 bludgers came at them from all directions. The role of the bludgers on the Quidditch field is to be disobedient and do everything possible to knock people down. They are very irritable. What the substitutes have to do is to use the bat to knock more raging bludgers away. Maureen reacted quickly and successfully blocked the attacks of all the bludgers with a bat. When it was Sweet's turn, he also knocked all the bludgers away. The others were not so lucky. A second-year student was hit on the back of the head by a bludger on the first hit, and fell off his broomstick. Another first-year student was hit by a bludger repeatedly and became unconscious during the fall. It was unbearable to watch. Why should I do such a hard job? Wingardium Leviosa. Albus raised his wand and cast a levitation spell to catch the person who fell from the broomstick, and then yawned. Because if I do it, they might bounce back. James said as he sat on the grass. He was best at defensive and offensive spells, such as Expelliarmus, Obstruction, Stupefy, etc. These were very useful in the defense against the Dark Arts class, but other spells were not well learned by James. If he was asked to cast a levitation spell, the freshman would probably bounce back like a ball after falling to the ground. It's okay, you're much better than me. When I cast the levitation spell, things will catch fire while floating. Hugo said indifferently while sitting next to James. His spells often carry flames. If you don't consider the consequences, the visual effect is still amazing. By the way, have you found the things you lost? Hugo asked again. James and Albus thought of the magic folding box and shook their heads in annoyance. The Gryffindor students did not seem suspicious. The third round is to catch the quaffle. The quaffle is much gentler. It will not actively attack people. The goal of the chaser is only to throw the quaffle into the goal frame to score, so the chaser has great requirements for catching the ball with bare hands. As for which position the substitute player will play, it is not certain, so each position must be tested. It is best to master all positions a little bit, so as to meet the requirements of the substitute player. The test of the quaffle is not a simple catch. 3 people throw the ball in the air, and then let the substitute player catch the ball, and then quickly fly to a specific distance and throw it towards the circular goal. This requires testing the reaction speed and accuracy of the player's pitch. Maureen is amazing. He is the first in both bludger and quaffle. James nodded slightly. Maureen caught the ball very quickly and threw it very accurately. His performance was very impressive. That Sweet is also very strange. He doesn't usually take flying lessons, but he can fly so well. Hugo said. Sweet only missed one in the accuracy of his throw. The latest novels are first published on 6th Book Bar. After an afternoon of selection, the Gryffindor Quidditch team finally selected 3 substitutes, all of whom were first-year students. Maureen, Sweet and Lily were all successfully selected. Okay, the list has been confirmed. The school's Quidditch competition will start in November. We will start training next week. The time will be notified separately. All of you should give me a copy of the class schedule so that I can arrange the training time. The substitutes must also participate. We must win the Quidditch Cup this year. Poker said with high morale. The time for arranging training is not fixed. It is impossible to squeeze all the time on the weekend. You can only choose to train in the afternoon or morning when you don't have classes. At the same time, you have to consider the training of other teams. After all, the school has 4 colleges, and each college wants to occupy the Quidditch field. Therefore, each captain must report to Madam Hooch in advance and let Madam Hooch arrange the field for which team to train. Although the chance of playing is not great, it is also a good thing to participate in the training. Lily said. Maureen looked around and found Sweet in the crowd. When Poker said to disband, Sweet walked towards the castle alone, in a hurry. At this time, only his back could be seen. This unsociable guy is really weird. Hugo couldn't help but say. Chapter 39 Hagrid. On Sunday, Hagrid invited Lily and Hugo to visit, and they also asked Maureen to go with him. Hagrid's hut was made of stone, crooked, and there were some big pumpkins planted at the door. Each pumpkin was as tall as a person, and there was a small livestock farm at the back, raising some roosters and other strange and magical animals. When they went over, Hagrid was holding a bloody thigh to feed a 2-headed salamander. The salamander had 2 heads, and one head grew where the tail should have grown. The 2 heads were desperately fighting for food. Interesting little guy. 2-headed salamanders are not common, they are the content of the 3rd grade class. Hagrid stretched out his big hand and washed the blood in the water tank. The little guy Hagrid mentioned was 2 meters long, his whole body was red, and he could spit out flames to roast food. Hugo and Lily looked at each other, and from their eyes, they could not see what was cute about this terrible 2-meter little guy who spit fire. Harry wrote to me to help look after you too, so how are you doing at school? Hagrid tied up the 2-headed salamander and closed the fence. It should be okay. Hugo looked at the wooden fence uncertainly, wondering if this fragile wooden fence could lock the 2-meter-tall fire-breathing little guy. Oh, you brought friends with you, I know you, Maureen, right? The Daily Prophet published an article about a man using a wand to deal with a wanted criminal's child. Well done. Hagrid laughed. Maureen said politely, that's my luck. The words of the Daily Prophet are not to be trusted. Anyway, that prey was caught because of you. Hagrid strode to a huge stone, where there was a box. He opened the box. Inside there were some biscuits. Try the rock cake I made myself. I sent one to Harry and the others yesterday. Hugo and Lily looked at each other, trying to pretend to like it. Maureen also grabbed a rock cake. He tried to take a bite, and he didn't want to take a second bite, because the first bite didn't work. Hagrid never knew that we hated rock biscuits. He used to send them to us. My first time I ate them, my teeth broke. Luckily, I was changing teeth at that time. Hugo whispered to Maureen when Hagrid turned around to get the shovel. Can't you just tell him directly? Maureen pretended to eat the rock biscuit in his hand. Lily spread her hands. Because of what happened 21 years ago, he became sentimental. Many people he knew passed away, so my parents decided that no matter what he sent, we can't say anything bad. Maureen couldn't bite the rock biscuit, so he simply gave it to Oi on his shoulder. As a result, he found that Oi ate a whole piece of rock biscuit easily. By the way, You came at the right time. Just to help me. I need to go to the Forbidden Forest to feed the hippogriffs. Can you help me carry these feeds? Hagrid already had 2 large bags in his hand, and there was a relatively small bag on the ground. What is this? Hugo saw that the bag was open, so he opened a crack to take a look, and soon he turned his head away in disgust. Dead rats. Hagrid hummed a little tune. There was no telling how many dead rats were in the bag. None of the 3 of them could move it. Finally, Maureen pulled out his wand and said, "As light as a feather." His lightning spell was not as light as his grandfather Alton's, which directly turned the heavy luggage into feathers, but at least it reduced some of the weight. In the end, the 3 of them could barely lift a bag of dead rats. My disintegration charm can't work for such a heavy thing, Maureen said helplessly. When they carried the bag to the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid was already taking care of 3 hippogriffs. These 3 hippogriffs looked like a family of 3. Hagrid was stroking the smallest one and feeding them dead rats. By the way, Hagrid, has there been anything strange in the Forbidden Forest recently? Maureen asked. Strange things happen in the Forbidden Forest every day. Of course, it may be strange to you, but it's normal for me. After all, there are many magical animals living in this forest. Yesterday, I rescued a unicorn stuck by a branch with Fizzarin together. Hagrid said casually. Maureen thought for a moment and asked again, are there tentacle monsters in the Forbidden Forest? They are the kind of things that are both plants and animals. Hagrid stopped and frowned. Maureen quickly added, I happened to see the introduction of tentacle monsters when I was reading in the library yesterday. I wonder if there are also tentacle monsters in the Forbidden Forest. Hugo and Lily also stopped and looked at Hagrid quietly, because Maureen told them about Sweet coming to the Forbidden Forest every morning, and Maureen also encountered tentacle monsters at that time. Hagrid said thoughtfully, now that you say that, I remember that the traces of destruction in the woods these days do look like those made by tentacle monsters, but I remember that tentacle monsters will not come to the edge of the Forbidden Forest. At least I haven't seen tentacle monsters in the Forbidden Forest. They are very vigilant and will not let people find them. There are no tentacle monsters in the Forbidden Forest? Are you sure? Maureen asked in surprise. I have been in Hogwarts all my life, how can I be unsure? Hagrid stood up and threw the dead mouse to the hippogriff. But Maureen himself would not make a mistake. He had read many books about magical animals before, and he remembered the tentacle monster's appearance very clearly. That morning, after following Sweet to the Forbidden Forest, he encountered the tentacle monster. If what Hagrid said was right, then where did this tentacle monster come from? The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Hagrid, what are the traces of destruction in the woods you just mentioned? Maureen asked again. Many trees have deep claw marks, many botricles are injured, and some animals have been attacked inexplicably. At first, I thought it was the water lion in the woods that left its territory, because those claw marks are similar to those of water lions, but after you said that, I found that it really looks like a tentacle monster. Hagrid said. Water lions are fierce animals. They usually live in ponds and swamps. They look similar to lions, but they are blue all over and can spray corrosive water. The more Maureen thought about it, the more confused he became. Hagrid had never seen a tentacle monster, but there were tentacle monsters moving around in the Forbidden Forest. What was going on? They quickly said goodbye to Hagrid and walked towards the castle. Maureen was thinking about this all the way. Maybe Sweet is a tentacle monster. Maybe he is an animagus who can turn into a tentacle monster. This can explain why he asked Professor Kane the difference between turning a person into an animal and an animagus that day. Hugo guessed. Don't be silly, use your brain, okay? It's impossible for a first-year student to turn into an animal. I think Sweet may have secretly raised a tentacle monster in the Forbidden Forest and come to see it every morning. Lily said. Impossible. How could a tentacle monster be brought in secretly if it's that big? Besides, only Hagrid could secretly raise a pet in the Forbidden Forest. Nothing in the Forbidden Forest can be hidden from Hagrid. I think it's more likely that Sweet is a tentacle monster. What do you think? Maureen. Hugo still insisted on his point of view. Maureen didn't answer. He felt that things were getting weirder and weirder. Chapter 40 Quidditch Training. In order to find out what happened to Sweet, Maureen followed Sweet to the Forbidden Forest again, but Sweet always disappeared in the Forbidden Forest very quickly. Maureen was not familiar with that place, so he had to give up. Quidditch Captain Poker coordinated a time according to everyone's schedule. On Wednesday afternoon, Gryffindor applied for the Quidditch training ground. Maureen and Lily participated in the training for the first time as substitutes. Poker, you know that Albus and I have classes, right? This is a crucial spell class. James didn't look happy. Yes. I still have to go to Transfiguration class. Albus said with an erratic look. Don't think I don't know that you have been skipping classes since the first class in the afternoon. I don't care what little secrets you two are up to. Train well for me. Next Saturday, Gryffindor will play against Hufflepuff. Newman and Quinn have left the team. We have to get used to the new players. Cheer up. Poker said without question. James and Albus squinted their lips. They had recently received another folding box sent by George. They continued to be the agent of Weasley's magical jokes in Hogwarts. They had planned to sell new products in the afternoon. Pork began to explain the tactics of Quidditch to everyone, from the wasp outflanking formation to the Plumpton back defense formation, and then to the eagle-wing double flying formation. Pork spoke passionately, but everyone looked a bit depressed because it started to rain outside. Do we have to train in the rain? Lily also got a new Firebolt 15, which was bought by her father. Maureen forgot to mention this to Grandpa Alton, so he could only use the school's Nimbus 2005 temporarily. Quidditch is played rain or shine, and it's not easy to apply for a venue. The game is about to start, and other colleges are in the stadium. Pork said. Maureen knew this. Last year, before he went to school, he went to watch a Quidditch league with his grandfather. It was raining even harder at that time. The seeker of the Atar Hurricane team was struck by lightning because he flew too high. For Quidditch, weather is not an excuse to cancel the game. Although Maureen and the other three did not participate in the training, they also had to fly around the court. The first training session was just to see the cooperation between the players and get familiar with the Gryffindor's combat methods. Flying in the rain is not easy. First of all, the vision will be blocked and it will be blown away by the wind. However, each member of Gryffindor wears a waterproof goggles, which was also invented by George Weasley and is specially provided to various Quidditch teams. On rainy days, wearing goggles will not affect vision, but will filter out rain. The magic performed by Quidditch goggles is very clever. Even if it rains heavily, you can't see the rain around you when wearing these goggles. It's like flying on a sunny day. Of course, your body will still be soaked, but at least your vision will be improved. Originally, George wanted to give the goggles a telescope function, which could magnify the distance seen and help the seeker find the golden snitch better, but later it was listed as a prohibited item by the Quidditch officials. They allowed the goggles to block rain, but they did not allow the goggles to have a telescope function, so George had to give up. Gryffindor players flashed in the air, Pork was there giving loud instructions, and Maureen was watching Gryffindor's training. Sweet suddenly flew in front of him and blocked his way. What's wrong? Maureen asked. Sweet stared at Maureen and said slowly, Why are you following me? Maureen frowned. He had been very careful in following twice, but he didn't expect to be discovered by Sweet. But he didn't feel guilty, but said, The disappearance of Jamie and the other three is related to you, right? Just take care of your own business and don't ask for trouble. Sweet said coldly. Really? I don't think so. Maureen wanted to figure out that this matter was not just because of those missing people, but to figure out why he would go back to the past every time someone disappeared. Sweet turned the flying broom to an angle and said before leaving, Some things are not for you to intervene. Take care of yourself. Maureen stood there, staring at Sweet, and then he stretched out his hand to block and catch the quaffle that Poke missed during training. I will definitely find out about this. Maureen smashed the quaffle into the goal. On Thursday night, their astronomy class was cancelled because of the cloudy weather, which made Maureen feel relieved. He now hates astronomy class. Every time he looks at the natural star map with a telescope, it is always misplaced. The positions of all the planets and stars in his eyes are different from those of other people, no matter how he changes the telescope. He went to the library as usual. Now, in addition to looking up the magic of heterochromatic pupils, he also needs to look up the background of Doi. The Sorting Hat mentioned heterochromatic pupils last time, and Maureen was very concerned. When he saw Doi, whose eyes were the same color as his, he felt that he had at least found a companion, although he didn't know where this companion came from. It's not in the rare creatures collection or the mysteries of water creatures. Doi, what exactly are you? Maureen reached out and touched Doi's head, talking to himself. Doi. Doi. Doi chirped twice in a comfortable voice, swinging her fluffy tail back and forth. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Doi has been following Maureen all the time, and is not picky about food. It eats whatever Maureen eats. It usually goes to class with Maureen. It seems that it doesn't like anyone to touch it except Maureen. Others can't see Doi's existence, and can't even hear Doi's calls. It was only when Doi was eating that Hugo and Lily confirmed that Maureen had indeed picked up a strange invisible creature. Although Maureen couldn't find any information about Doi in the book, he also learned a lot about magical animals, and was more familiar with the characteristics of these animals in the wizarding world, which was also an extra gain. However, when Maureen was about to leave the library, a familiar phantom flashed before his eyes again. Countless lights and shadows moved backwards from his side, and he returned to an hour ago again. Who is missing this time? Maureen returned to the moment when he was about to step into the library, and looked around in surprise. Every time he went back to the past, there was no sign, but every time he went back to the past, it meant that someone would inexplicably disappear for more than 10 hours or even a day. He frowned, and did not enter the library, but went directly back to the Gryffindor common room with his school bag. He was going to look for Hugo, but Hugo did not seem to be in the common room. When it was time to go to bed, he realized who was missing this time. Chapter 41 Strange Classroom. Hugo is missing. This incident caught Maureen off guard. Tonight was supposed to be an astronomy class, but because of the rain, their astronomy class was cancelled. Maureen had to go to the library to find information. The library was one of Hugo's least favorite places, so he stayed in the common room to help James and Albus sell Weasley magic jokes. But after Maureen came back, Hugo didn't know where he went. He asked James and Albus, and they only said that Hugo had left the common room earlier. It's already 12 o'clock. Maureen looked at Hugo's empty bed in the dormitory and began to worry. He turned his head to look at Sweet's bed, which was also empty and hadn't come back yet. Hugo didn't get lost too, did he? Toby asked while sitting on the bed. They were used to Sweet coming back late, but Hugo was the first person in the dormitory to go to bed. It was too abnormal for him not to come back at this time. Maureen had a hunch that Hugo was not just lost. This time, he might have disappeared mysteriously just like the 3 people last time. Maureen found the prefect Nelson and told him about Hugo's disappearance. But Nelson didn't seem to care. He was wearing his pajamas, ready to go to sleep with hazy eyes. It's okay, go back and rest. They must have lost their way and will be back soon. Nelson yawned and returned to his dormitory. Maureen no longer expected Nelson to help. To be honest, the disappearance of freshmen in recent times did not attract everyone's attention. Everyone thought it was just an accidental incident of getting lost. If Maureen hadn't lost someone every time he went back to the past inexplicably, he would have thought it was no big deal. Maureen decided to look for it himself. He left the Gryffindor Tower and ran to the 7th floor of the castle. Mosby appeared on the 7th floor last time, and Jamie and Sweet were also on the 7th floor. Maureen felt that there must be something strange on the 7th floor, and Hugo might be there too. It was already late at night, and there were no people in the corridor. Occasionally, 1 or 2 Gryffindor ghosts chatting passed by and soon disappeared into the wall. Maureen walked along the floating staircase from the 8th floor to the 7th floor, heading towards the classroom where Jamie and Sweet disappeared that day. There were landscape paintings and portraits on the walls of the Hogwarts castle from time to time. The people and animals in these paintings would visit each other, and even a white cloud would float from one frame to another. Maureen walked past these paintings, and then heard the familiar declaration of war again. Stop. You little coward. Fleeing without a fight is a disgrace tonight, and you dare to run away. Circa Duggan's voice came from the wall. Maureen stopped and asked in confusion, Circa Duggan, weren't you in that classroom? How did you get hung in the corridor again? I want to know too. Circa Duggan looked particularly annoyed. Which filthy villain moved my territory without permission while I was looking for my heroic warhorse? I searched for a long time before I found the way home. The fat gray pony behind Circa Duggan shook its tail. It was probably tired of eating the grass in its own territory, so it went to other paintings to find feed. Circa Duggan had to pull it back every time. Maureen noticed that there was a horse hoof print on Circa Duggan's chest. It must be that Circa Duggan's process of finding his heroic warhorse was not smooth, and the warhorse was a little bit angry. Circa Duggan, did you see any suspicious people wandering around on your way home? Maureen asked. Yes. You are the only suspicious person. Wandering around without sleeping at night, you should pull out your wand and duel with me. Circulate drew out his sword. I want to find someone. My friend is missing. Can you help me, Circulate? Merlin asked. A brave knight will never refuse to help a polite person. Who is your friend? Circulate put his sword back into the scabbard with great effort, straightened his chest, and spoke very enthusiastically. This time he finally did not continue to declare war on Merlin. Hugo Weasley, I don't know if you have seen him. He is a first-year boy in Gryffindor, about the same height as me, with red hair and freckles on his face. Merlin tried his best to describe Hugo's appearance. The red-haired boy in the first grade? Now that you mention it, I remember that not long ago, when I went to look for my friends, I did see a little red-haired boy coming down from the 8th floor. By the way, he went to the classroom where I used to be. Circulate leaned on the pony, holding his chin in contemplation, but the pony shook, and Circulate accidentally fell down, and the visor on his helmet fell off. He quickly pushed the visor up, got up and said, "Let's go. Let's charge together. Save our friends in distress. Let the light shine on the world again. If darkness defeats light, let us die on the battlefield." Circulate originally wanted to ride a horse, but then he remembered that his warhorse was in a bad mood, so he simply shook his armor and rushed into the painting next to him. In the painting next to him, there were two wizards playing chess. When he ran past the two wizards playing chess, he picked up the queen and threw it into the sky, shouted checkmate, and then continued to jump into another painting. The two interrupted wizards protested in the back, and the queen chess piece thrown to the ground by Circulate was struggling to climb back to the chessboard, but Maureen didn't care about these. He quickly ran to the classroom he had been in last time, turned around the armor that creaked from time to time, and then pushed open the door of the classroom. He searched the classroom carefully, but didn't see anyone. Instead, he saw Peeves on the blackboard. "You little brat didn't sleep, but ran out to wander around. Tisk tisk. You should be put in detention." Peeves turned around and was about to throw the chalk head at Maureen. With the help of the light of the fire on the wall, Peeves saw Maureen's appearance clearly, and suddenly jumped. He looked particularly surprised. "It's you." Then Peeves turned around and ran away quickly through the wall. Maureen looked at the place where Peeves left in confusion. He was still thinking about how to deal with Peeves, but he didn't expect Peeves to be so scared that he ran away as soon as he saw him. The latest novels are first published on 69shushu.com. Strange, is Peeves so scared of me? Peeves is the most hated ghost in Hogwarts. He usually plays tricks on students everywhere. Even senior students would avoid Peeves when they see him. Except for the Bloody Baron, Maureen has never heard of Peeves being scared of any student. Circulate ran into a painting next to the classroom and said in a heroic and high-spirited voice, "A brave knight can always defeat the enemy without a fight. This is our chivalry. Defeat the evil ghost. My dear comrade, have you found your partner? Get out." In the painting Circulate ran into, there was a group of women wrapped in bathrobes, screaming and throwing various vases at Circulate. Circulate jumped into another painting in a panic, and the vases broke into pieces at his feet. Knights are not allowed to do despicable things. "Sorry, my dear ladies," Circulate shouted with a blush. Maureen went to ask the group of ladies wrapped in bathrobes if they had seen Hugo, but not all the people in the painting liked to communicate with wizards like Circulate. The women who were taking a bath had already slammed the bathroom door shut and ignored Maureen. Maureen had no time to chase Peeves, who had only written a bunch of swear words on the blackboard. He recalled the last time he came to this classroom, and then looked at Circulate sitting on the grass in a landscape painting, and remembered that something was wrong. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42, The Territory of the Mad Knight. Circulate, your original portrait is not on the corridor or in this classroom, right? Maureen asked tentatively. "Yes, my brave comrade." Circulate seemed to regard Maureen as one of his own. He sat on the side of the road in the painting. The painting was a noisy street scene with heavy snow. There were many people walking around on the street. The people in the painting were celebrating the arrival of Christmas, and lights and decorations were hung everywhere. Many people also waved to Circulate, obviously knowing this guy who was always wearing armor. "Who moved your painting here?" Don't you know? Maureen asked again. That's right. I don't know. Don't let me catch that sneaky traitor who sold out my territory while I was conquering the world. Such a person is unforgivable. Sir Cadogan was very angry, but a child in the painting gave him a Santa hat. Sir Cadogan stood up, took off his helmet, put on the Santa hat, and said, "Thank you very much, handsome little gentleman. Sir Cadogan is at your service at any time." Maureen understood what Sir Cadogan meant by conquering the world. It was probably estimated that when Sir Cadogan went to find his stubborn pony who was always running away from home, someone secretly moved his portrait away from its original place. The person in the portrait can go directly back to his own frame, no matter where he is, so when Sir Cadogan returned to his frame, he found that the frame had been moved to another place. But why did he move Sir Cadogan's portrait again and again? Maureen looked at the person in the painting who greeted Sir Cadogan, and then looked at Sir Cadogan, and soon thought of the most critical point. Although many portraits in the castle can talk and visit each other, most of them will not talk to students casually. Many people in the portraits are just doing their own things and will not care about things that do not concern them. It is rare to find a portrait knight like Sir Cadogan who is restless and looks for students to challenge and likes to help people enthusiastically. If he sees something, it is easy to tell it. In other words, someone does not want Sir Cadogan, who always talks nonsense, to see certain things, so his portrait was moved away, which means that there must be some secrets where Sir Cadogan's original portrait was. Maureen figured this out and immediately asked, "Sir Cadogan, where's your original portrait?" "My brave comrade, near the North Tower of Hogwarts Castle. That is a piece of land I have conquered after many years of fighting, but I was betrayed by treacherous people and had to leave my hometown," Sir Cadogan said indignantly. Let's go there and see what's going on. I mean, let's go to your original territory to scout the enemy and see if we can catch the treacherous villains. Retake your territory." Maureen agreed seriously. Sir Cadogan's eyes suddenly filled with tears. He took off his Santa hat, put on his helmet again, drew out his sword, and shouted, "Thank you, my loyal friend. When I take back my territory, I will give you half of it." When he drew out his sword, he scared the little boy who gave him the Santa hat. The little boy burst into tears. A black dog ran over from a distance and barked at Sir Cadogan. Sir Cadogan fled from the painting in a panic. "This way. My great and brave friend, let's go and reclaim our lost territory together." Sir Cadogan passed through the paintings in the corridor and returned to his original frame, but his frame was too big for Maureen to move. Even if he used the disapparition charm, moving a painting in the middle of the night would always be too conspicuous. It was now bedtime, and it was against school rules for students to wander around in the corridor. Maureen didn't want to be caught by Filch, the administrator of Hogwarts. Hugo said that Filch had been the administrator of Hogwarts during his father's time. He was old and had a bad temper, especially after his pet Mrs. Norris died of old age. His attitude towards students became even worse, and he would punish students from time to time. "I'll help you move the frame back next time I have a chance." Maureen ran towards the North Tower of Hogwarts under the leadership of Sir Cadogan. He had never been to the North Tower, which seemed to be where the divination class was held, but divination was an elective course, and there was no such course in the curriculum for first-year freshmen. The castle of Hogwarts is not decorated with picture frames everywhere. Sir Cadogan couldn't move forward in the place without picture frames in front. Merlin could only quietly take down a book-sized landscape painting from the wall and let Sir Cadogan squeeze into the landscape painting. "Hurry up and keep up with my pace, mighty warrior. Go through the fearless ladder in front and climb up. Use your sword to pierce the throat of this armor. Charge, my warrior. The canyon on the left is difficult and dangerous. That is the only way for us to conquer. Don't be afraid, go forward bravely. We need to crawl forward and turn to the swamp on the right. There is a statue of Gregory, a flatterer who likes to flatter others. Pull out your sword and split it in half." Merlin ran carefully for 20 minutes, and under the command of Sir Cadogan's various nonsensical slogans of bravely moving forward, he came to an unfamiliar platform. This place has a wide view, and you can see the night view on the other side of Hogwarts, but it is already midnight and it is pitch black. There are only a few black shadows flying over the sky of the Forbidden Forest, which may be some kind of big birds. "This is my original territory. Be alert, we are ready to fight." Sir Cadogan has already run from the landscape painting in Maureen's hand to painting on the wall next to him, draws out his sword, and looks left and right, but the painting is a picture of the starry sky. Sir Cadogan's body is unstable and he floats up in the starry sky without gravity. If your painting is here, the secret that I don't want you to see should be nearby. So what strange places are there nearby? Maureen glanced around. Opposite the wall where Sir Cadogan's portrait was originally hung was a wall with some paintings on it, but they were all photos of fruits and vegetables, and some classical and strange buildings. These things can't speak. There are some portraits of people in the corner not far away, but those people gathered together to enjoy dinner and didn't even look at Maureen. The latest novels are first published on 69shushu.com. Maureen touched the wall with his hand. There was nothing special about it. He wanted to see if he could find some special places, or maybe there was a secret passage inside the wall, but the wall was very solid, without any cracks. The withered yellow flames burned on the torches on the wall, and the lights kept swaying, making Maureen's shadow flicker and sway from side to side. Maureen didn't find anything strange, but at this moment he suddenly heard footsteps, coming from far away and coming towards him. Chapter 43, The Sleepwalker in the Divination Tower. The footsteps came so suddenly that even Maureen didn't react. He wanted to find a place to hide, but it was too late. A figure had already walked into his sight. This was a witch wearing an old plaid pajamas. She looked to be in her 60s or 70s, with gray hair and thick glasses, almost as thick as the bottom of a wine bottle. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyebrows were crisscrossed. She walked slowly towards Maureen, with a very strange look and behavior. Maureen's heart kept beating. He didn't know this witch, but he seemed to have seen her at the opening ceremony because she was also sitting in the professor's seat. This meant that he was caught by a professor wandering around the castle in the middle of the night. Maureen took a deep breath and was about to think of an excuse to explain how he appeared here in the middle of the night, but the witch in the pajamas seemed to have not seen Maureen and walked past him. Is she sleepwalking? Maureen breathed a sigh of relief. If it was sleepwalking, there was no need to worry too much. He just had to wait for her to walk over. However, the talkative Sir Cadogan shouted cheerfully on the wall, "Good evening, Professor Trelawney." Merlin wanted to rush over and shut this guy's mouth. If he woke up Professor Trelawney, he would probably be arrested and taken to see Filch and put in detention for a day or two. Then he was stunned for a moment. Professor Trelawney? Isn't this name? Merlin remembered that there was a book called The Story of Harry Potter and Voldemort Must Be Told, which mentioned a prophecy. It was also that prophecy that linked Harry Potter and Voldemort together. It was said that it was Professor Trelawney from Hogwarts. Thinking of this, Merlin suddenly felt awe for this wrinkled witch. Professor Trelawney stopped when she heard Sir Cadogan's greeting. Merlin's scalp was numb. He was thinking about running away by himself, because Professor Trelawney didn't know him anyway. But Professor Trelawney did not respond to Sir Cadogan, but slowly walked to the window of the platform and looked out the window. The weather was not good tonight. It was drizzling a little, so Maureen's astronomy class was cancelled. But the moment Professor Trelawney looked out the window, all the rain disappeared, and the bright moon peeked out from the dark clouds. Everything changed so quickly that even Maureen didn't have time to react. Then a dreamy and ethereal voice came out of Professor Trelawney's mouth. "Darkness is awakening, time is disordered, people who have been deprived of their memories have peeked into the truth in the fog, pierced the disguise of the god of death, and the dead are on their way." Professor Trelawney's voice changed from ethereal to shrill, which made Maureen shudder. He looked at Professor Trelawney, who kept repeating these words in his mouth in astonishment, a little at a loss. Was she talking in her sleep, or was she? Maureen was surprised. Could it be that Professor Trelawney was predicting something? Just like the prediction she made to Harry, but would it be such a coincidence? It was the first time he met her, and he didn't know her. Boom! The darkness outside the castle was torn apart by a flash of lightning. The moon had long since disappeared. The dark clouds gathered again, and the raindrops fell again, rustling. Huh? Professor Trelawney suddenly shuddered all over, then glanced around strangely, saw Maureen, and asked, "Oh, dear, who are you? Why are you here in the middle of the night?" Maureen didn't know how to answer. He was still thinking about what Professor Trelawney had just said. Was it a dream or? But if it was a dream, it might not be too real. "Professor, I'm sorry, I'm lost. I'm a freshman in Gryffindor and I don't know how to get back." Maureen came back to his senses and said, "A freshman in Gryffindor, it's normal to get lost in such a big castle. It's so late, strange, why am I here?" Professor Trelawney didn't seem to know about her sleepwalking problem. She raised her thick glasses and yawned. Professor, don't you know what you said just now? What do you mean by dark awakening? Maureen asked. Professor Trelawney waved her hand. Dark enlightenment, what is that? I think you must have heard it wrong, dear. Hurry back. Go straight along the corridor, turn right at the end, and then you will see the place where this tower and the castle are connected. You will be familiar with it. Do you want me to take you there? Maureen shook his head. No, I can go by myself. Good night, Professor. He ran in the original direction holding the landscape frame in his hand, and hung the painting back on the wall halfway. Despicable traitor, wait. I will definitely come back. Sir Cadogan waved his sword in the painting on the wall. Sorry, Sir Cadogan, I have classes tomorrow. I will come to you next time. Maureen said casually. He was still thinking about Professor Trelawney's words in his mind. It doesn't matter, my brave comrade, there is a long way to go. We will definitely kill those sneaky people together. Sir Cadogan looked particularly energetic, his figure flashed, and he disappeared in a painting. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. It only takes a blink of an eye for the person in the portrait to return to his own frame, but to go somewhere else, he needs to use other paintings to achieve it. Maureen didn't care about him and returned to Gryffindor Tower carefully. Come back earlier next time. You disturbed my sweet dream. The fat lady was not happy to be woken up in the middle of the night. When she returned to the dormitory, she found that Toby was still awake. Where did you go? Why didn't you come back? Toby asked hurriedly. Maureen glanced at Sweet's bed and found that Sweet didn't come back either. Toby was the only one in the dormitory just now. I went to look for Hugo, but I didn't find him. Maureen changed into pajamas tiredly and sat on the bed. There were more and more questions in his mind. It was fine that he didn't find the reason why Sir Cadogan's portrait was moved tonight, but he heard Professor Trelawney say some strange things there. Darkness awakens the spirit, time is disordered, the person who has been deprived of memory has peeked into the truth in the fog, pierced the disguise of the god of death, and the dead are on their way. What does this unclear sentence mean? Did Professor Trelawney really make a prophecy? But if it is a prophecy, what does this sentence represent? Shouldn't the real prophecy be similar to, a wizard will fall from a flying broom and break his leg in the near future, or someone's most worried thing will happen within 2 months, and a more advanced prophecy is that the only wizard who can resist the Dark Lord will be born at the end of July, etc. But Professor Trelawney's words are so incoherent that Maureen can't figure it out at all. If this sentence is connected with the strange things that happened recently, it really seems to be the case. For example, time disorder can be understood as Maureen's own return to the past, and people who have been deprived of memory can be understood as the amnesia of those missing people, but what is piercing the disguise of the god of death? What do the other 2 sentences mean? He found paper and pen, wrote down the content of the prophecy, and thought carefully. I looked at Hugo's empty bed again and couldn't fall asleep that night. Chapter 44, Unbelievable Prophecy. The next morning, when Maureen got up, he found that Hugo and Sweet had not returned all night, and he was worried. Sweet was a mysterious person who dared to go to the Forbidden Forest early every morning. Maureen estimated that nothing would happen to him. He was more worried about Hugo. Hugo is missing too? What is that guy doing? Lily heard about this when she ran to them to have breakfast together, and frowned slightly. Yes, he didn't come back last night, and neither did Sweet. Maureen said in a heavy tone. Lily said dissatisfiedly, Hugo is never reliable. He is always careless. It's normal for him to get lost. Lily, this matter has nothing to do with Hugo's carelessness. You should also know that this is not the first time someone has disappeared. Maureen's tone was very serious. But no one was injured. Hugo will definitely come back. At most, he forgot where he ran. It's no big deal. Let's go to eat. I bet he is already in the hall. Lily said. Maureen and Lily came to the hall together, looked at the long table of Gryffindor, and looked at the students of other colleges, but did not find any trace of Hugo. They found a place to sit down. The food this morning was particularly rich, but Maureen had no appetite. Lily, did Professor Trelawney make a prophecy for your father about Voldemort? Did your father tell you what Professor Trelawney's condition was at that time? Maureen asked. Lily took a sip of pumpkin juice, thought for a moment, and said, he seemed to say that Professor Trelawney's predictions were unreliable. Once she really made a prediction, she couldn't even remember what she said. Why are you asking this? When I went out to look for Hugo last night, I met Professor Trelawney who was sleepwalking. She looked a little weird and said something. The situation was similar to what you said. It felt like she was predicting something. Maureen looked at Oa, who was eating a sandwich, and told Lily what happened last night. Lily laughed. How is that possible? How could Professor Trelawney just happen to meet you and make a prophecy for you? Maybe she was just talking in her sleep. Don't take it seriously. But you said it yourself. Professor Trelawney will not remember what she said when she made a prophecy, right? When she spoke to me last night, she was in that state. Maureen emphasized. Lily said without hesitation, that's because the object of her prophecy was my father, and my father is special, but I'm not trying to hit you, you are not special. What I mean is that her prophecies are generally related to big figures in the wizarding world, right? For example, Voldemort at that time, and Wormtail returned to Voldemort. And this sentence clearly sounds like Professor Trelawney talking in her sleep. Lily didn't believe that the words Maureen heard were the so-called prophecy. She had heard about the relationship between her father and Voldemort since she was a child. In her opinion, the so-called real prophecy should be about important figures like her father and Voldemort, so when Maureen talked about what happened last night, Lily didn't take it to heart. Maureen frowned and didn't say anything else. Although he didn't think he was special, he always felt strange when Lily said this. He didn't expect Lily to believe him. In fact, even if Maureen said that every time he went back to the past, someone disappeared, Lily would definitely regard it as a coincidence, or Lily would not believe the fact that Maureen went back to the past. Maureen couldn't produce any evidence to prove that he really went back to the past. If Lily didn't believe it, then there was no need for him to insist on explaining anything. He planned to figure things out on his own. After breakfast, they went to the Defense Against the Dark Arts class together. Hugo didn't show up, but Maureen found that Sweet was waiting in the classroom early. Sweet didn't go back to the classroom last night, but he's here now. Maureen was very annoyed. Sweet showed up, so what about Hugo? It seems that a classmate will miss today's broomstick death class. What a pity. Professor Francis pointed to Hugo, who was absent from class, and scanned the surroundings with a cold voice, and then began his boring but unforgettable Defense Against the Dark Arts class. After the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, many people lost interest in Quidditch for a while, and even didn't want to touch the flying broom. Professor Francis told the story of a player from the Wimbledon Wasps who was struck by lightning and mysteriously disappeared during a Quidditch match in 1956. His body finally appeared in a glass display case in a Muggle museum and became a Muggle exhibit. This incident made all students feel deeply afraid of Quidditch. Is he kidding? Quidditch games shouldn't be that scary. Lily was usually not timid, but after listening to Professor Francis' class, she felt scared when she thought about joining the Quidditch team. Maybe. Maureen packed his school bag. He didn't listen to the class seriously. He kept thinking about Hugo. The Wimbledon Wasps was Hugo's favorite team. He knew all the gossip about the Wimbledon Wasps. He didn't know if Hugo knew about it. Maureen turned around and saw Sweet, who was about to leave the classroom. He walked over quickly and said in a deep voice, "Sweet, where did you go last night? Where did Hugo go? Why didn't you two come back?" Sweet stopped. This time he didn't seem to intend to avoid Maureen. He stared at Maureen strangely, and then slowly said, "I don't remember." "You don't remember? What do you mean?" Maureen frowned. Sweet's face was very pale, and there were even dark circles under his eyes. He looked a little tired. He said in a hoarse voice, "I don't remember where I went last night." Sweet left the classroom without looking back. It was not until Sweet left that Lily said, "He looks like he's lying." The latest novels are first published on 6th Book Bar. Maureen fell into deep thought. He didn't know whether he should believe Sweet's words, but Maureen felt that Sweet must know something. Yesterday he went back to the past and someone disappeared. That person should be Hugo. What happened to Sweet? Is he really lying? Hugo missed the whole morning of class, so Maureen had to run to Professor Kane and tell him about Hugo's disappearance. Weasley is missing? He didn't return to the dormitory last night? Huh? Another one who got lost. Professor Kane was correcting homework. When he heard Maureen's words, he put down the pen in his hand. Although Professor Kane is the Dean of Gryffindor, he is relatively kind and not so harsh on students. Yes, it was the same with Jamie last time, Professor. Don't you think their disappearance is too coincidental? Maureen said hurriedly. Professor Kane nodded slightly. It's a bit strange, but it's not uncommon for freshmen to get lost. Walker, I suggest you go to lunch quickly. Weasley might show up from some classroom this afternoon. Don't worry too much. Jamie Leonard was the same last time, wasn't he? Seeing that he couldn't convince Professor Kane, Maureen could only leave the office. Wait until Hugo comes back and see if we can clarify the matter. Maureen walked towards the hall thoughtfully. Chapter 45, The Deathly Hallows and Grindelwald. Hugo returned to the common room at 10 o'clock in the evening. He looked a little dazed when he came back, and he bumped into a second-year girl. See? I said this careless guy would definitely come back, Lily said unhappily. Maureen put down the book in her hand and asked, Hugo, are you okay? Hugo shook his head and said uncertainly, I don't know, my head is a little heavy. Hugo touched his forehead, stumbled, and knocked over the chair. Maureen quickly supported him and let him sit on the armchair, then took out a chocolate frog from his school bag and stuffed it into Hugo. But Hugo was distracted and didn't catch the chocolate frog. The chocolate frog jumped onto the table and was held down by Maureen. You don't look mentally well, you should go to sleep first. Maureen didn't ask Hugo about the details immediately. In this state, Hugo probably couldn't remember anything. When he returned to the dormitory, Maureen found that Sweet, who usually came back very late, was lying in bed early today. What happened to the two of them? Maureen sat on his bed, looked at Hugo, and then looked at Sweet, with doubts lingering in his heart. When he got up the next morning, Maureen habitually glanced at Sweet's bed and found that Sweet had left the dormitory as usual, and the quilt on the bed was neatly folded. Hugo was still sleeping. Maureen did not wake Hugo up. He went to the hall to have breakfast and brought some bread back to Hugo. Hugo slept until noon before getting up. He touched his head and looked much better than last night. Eat something. Maureen handed over the breakfast. Thank you. Hugo bit the bread and tilted his head, not knowing what he was thinking. Let me guess, have you forgotten where you went yesterday? Maureen asked. Hugo nodded, then shook his head. It's a very strange feeling. I feel like I'm doing something, but I can't explain it clearly. For a while, my body didn't seem to belong to me. The body doesn't belong to me? What does that mean? Maureen asked. Now no clues can be missed. Hugo is the person involved. Maybe he can learn something from him. Hugo took a gulp of orange juice and continued, I remember selling Weasley merchandise with James and others in the Gryffindor common room the night before last. Then, I inexplicably had an idea in my mind. It seemed that I had to go somewhere quickly, but I forgot where I went. He racked his brains but couldn't figure out the specific process. Like all the missing people, the next period of time was blank for him. You went to a classroom on the 7th floor. Sir Cadogan told me. Maureen said. Who is Sir Cadogan? Hugo was puzzled. He is a person in a painting, on the 7th floor. Don't you have any impression of him? Hugo shook his head. No, I don't remember going to the 7th floor. I forgot where I went after leaving the common room. Then where did you come back from last night? What is your last memory? Maureen asked again. Hugo put down the bread and answered a little uncertainly. I came back from the 7th floor. No, it seems to be from a strange tower. I am not sure, it seems that I was in a tower the previous second, and appeared on the 7th floor the next second. It doesn't make sense. Tower. Maureen remembered where he and Sir Cadogan went the night before. Sir Cadogan's portrait was originally on the platform near the tower, but it was still a long distance from the 7th floor of the castle. Maureen ran for about 20 minutes to get there last time. Hugo put the bread and juice on the bedside table, then lay down again. Then he cried out in pain and got up again. What's wrong? Maureen asked. Hugo touched his back and looked at the bed again. He found a crystal ball on the bedsheet. It was the fake prophecy ball from Weasley's Hocus Pocus. It was only the size of 2 fingers. No, I must have forgotten to put away the fake prophecy ball. I just pressed it. But it's a bit strange. I feel a little cold here on my back. I don't know what's going on. Hugo turned his head hard to see what was on his back, but he couldn't see it. Let me see. Maureen stood up and walked to Hugo. Hugo lifted up his clothes, and then Maureen was suddenly stunned. What's wrong? Is there something behind me? Hugo asked. There's a strange mark on your back. Wait, I seem to have seen this mark somewhere. I'll draw it for you. Maureen found paper and pen and traced the mark on Hugo's back. It was a triangle with a circle in the middle of the triangle and a line running between the triangle and the circle. Isn't this? When Maureen showed this mark to Hugo, Hugo was shocked. Maureen suddenly remembered what this mark was. Then they both said at the same time, Grindelwald's mark. The latest novel is first published on 69 Shuba. The Mark of the Deathly Hallows. Maureen and Hugo looked at each other. Maureen just said Grindelwald, while Hugo said Deathly Hallows. Is the Deathly Hallows this mark? Maureen was born in a wizard family. He had heard the story about the three brothers and the god of death. The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone and the Invisibility Cloak were the Deathly Hallows, which were said to be able to defeat the god of death. However, this mark was not recorded in the storybook of the three brothers. It's the Mark of the Deathly Hallows. I'm sure of it because my dad told me the origin of this mark, and so did Uncle Harry. This mark troubled them for a long time. You should know that if they want to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes, they need to figure out what this mark means. Hugo said. But I remember in the book Dangerous Wizards, this mark means that Grindelwald, another dark wizard before Voldemort, who was defeated by Headmaster Dumbledore, had his disciples use this mark, just like Voldemort's skull and snake mark, which once frightened many wizards for a period of time. Maureen has read many books, and he remembers very clearly that Grindelwald's mark is this. Hugo said thoughtfully, now that you mention it, I remember that my father also mentioned that the Mark of the Deathly Hallows is the same as Grindelwald's. The most powerful wand in the world, the Elder Wand, one of the Deathly Hallows, originally belonged to Grindelwald, and later fell into Dumbledore's hands, and then fell into Voldemort's hands, and finally, was broken by Harry's uncle. Broken. Maureen was slightly surprised. The books about Voldemort and Harry Potter published by the Wizarding World did not mention this. The most powerful Elder Wand in the world was broken, which was a huge loss. Yes, it was broken. Hugo said affirmatively, then he stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at the mark on his back with his back to the mirror. The mark was located on the back of his heart. The mark was red, and I don't know what it was carved with. But why is there this mark on my back? I don't know Grindelwald. Hugo rubbed it hard with his back to the mirror, trying to wipe off the mark, but the mark was still very conspicuous. This must be told to the professor. Maureen said seriously. Chapter 46 The Missing Mark. Whether it was the Deathly Hallows or Grindelwald, this ominous mark on Hugo was not a good sign. It was impossible for Maureen and Hugo to explain it alone, and this inexplicable mark must have a lot to do with Hugo's disappearance. Maybe Mosby, Delia, and Jamie were also branded with this mark. Maureen thought of the other three missing people. Are you saying that during the time I lost my memory, someone had nothing better to do than to carve this mark on my back? What was his purpose? To get me to join? Or did he expect me to believe in Grindelwald? Hugo asked in confusion. Maureen said seriously, in any case, this mark must be forbidden, otherwise it should appear in the storybook of the three brothers and the god of death. The forbidden mark has appeared, and we must tell the professor about it and let them deal with it. Or my parents, or Uncle Harry, they will definitely be able to explain it. Hugo changed his hand to touch the mark on his back. By the way, this mark is very cold, and it feels like my heart has become chilly. Before being hit by the false prophecy ball, I didn't have this feeling. You try to touch it. Is it very cold? Maureen stretched out his hand and carefully approached the mark on Hugo's back. Before his fingers touched the mark, a chill swept from his fingertips. It is indeed very cold. Maureen's fingers had touched the mark, but at this moment, a strange breath suddenly came from the mark, along Maureen's fingertips quickly into his mind. Maureen felt as if his head was hit by a stream of water, and then many strange memory fragments suddenly appeared in his mind. These memory fragments did not belong to him at all, but to another person's memory. Maureen opened his eyes wide. What he saw in front of him was not Hugo's back, but a long corridor with some portraits hanging on the walls of the corridor, and the sound of students laughing in the distance. Then Maureen realized what he was doing. This is Hugo's memory. He actually saw Hugo's lost memory. The corridor that appeared in Maureen's mind was the corridor on the 7th floor of Hogwarts Castle. He could see the portraits and landscapes on both sides of the corridor. At this time, Hugo was walking towards the abandoned classroom on the 7th floor. Then Hugo opened the door of the classroom, but what Maureen saw was not the scene in the classroom, but a fog. It was like being in a foggy forest, with a slight wind blowing around and rustling the branches. The sound was very strange and creepy, as if something terrible was whispering. Hiss. Maureen took a breath of cold air. The scene in front of him had disappeared. He felt his head was a little dizzy and his vision became a little blurry. Hugo seemed to have become two shadows in front of him. Molin, What's wrong with you? Hugo asked with a worried look on his face. The confusion in Maureen's mind gradually disappeared, and Hugo's appearance became clearer. He let out a long breath and said uncertainly, I seemed to see something just now, something very strange. It was very strange. Your eyes were actually glowing just now. That scene was really strange. Hugo looked at Maureen's eyes with interest. My eyes are glowing? What does it mean? Maureen asked puzzled. I don't know. Anyway, I heard you groan just now, so I turned my head to look at you, and as a result, your eyes glowed blue on the left and green on the right. It looked too weird. Hugo said. My eyes are emitting blue and green light? Is it so scary? Maureen rubbed his eyes. Are you sure you are not seeing things? Hugo shrugged his shoulders and yawned. I can't guarantee it, maybe I saw it wrong. Since I came back, I have felt groggy and uncomfortable. Hey, no, that cold feeling seems to have disappeared. Hugo remembered that there was an ominous mark on his back, and reached out to touch his back, but Maureen was surprised and said, wait, your mark is gone. Gone. Hugo quickly moved to the mirror, turned his back to the mirror, and tried to turn his head to look, and said in surprise, it's really gone? How is this possible? Was it an illusion just now? It's impossible that both of us are hallucinating. Maureen shook his head. He could feel the coldness on Hugo's body, but after he touched Grindelwald's mark, the mark disappeared strangely. It was really strange. Maureen fell into deep thought. His mind was getting more and more confused. What happened? Was it Hugo's lost memory that he saw just now? If so, where did Hugo go? If not, what happened just now? Most importantly, where did the mark behind Hugo go? Should we still tell the dean about this? Hugo asked hesitantly. The mark is gone. Will he believe it if I tell him? The answer is self-evident. If Hugo's mark was still there, it would be convincing. Now that the ominous mark is gone, it would probably be regarded as a prank by freshmen if it was told to others. I remembered something. If you have this mark on you, does it mean that other missing and amnesiacs also have this ominous mark on them? Maureen said thoughtfully. Hugo suddenly realized, yes, we can go and confirm whether they also have the mark, Mosby, Delia and Jamie. Or Sweet. Maureen set his eyes on the empty Sweet bed in the dormitory. Today is Saturday, and Sweet is not in the dormitory as usual. In fact, since the start of the school, except for sleeping with Sweet and attending classes, they have not seen Sweet for a long time. Maureen has seen Sweet in the library a few times, but that's it. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. He's really a weird person. It's a bit strange to say that he is missing. I think he is missing every day. Hugo kept guessing what kind of person Sweet is on the way to lunch. Maureen was not sure whether Sweet was lying, but Sweet was also a mystery to him now. Oh, Hugo, you woke up. I thought you were going to sleep all day. Lily waved at them. Maureen and Hugo sat next to Lily and looked at the full table of food. Hugo was relaxed. He picked up the knife and fork and started to eat voraciously. By the way, Maureen, James told me 10 minutes ago that Poker has applied for a Quidditch venue from Madam Hooch. We have to attend training at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Please help inform Sweet. Lily said. It's impossible to inform him. You know he's elusive. Maureen picked up a baked potato for Doy, and Doy ate it happily. Really? I saw Sweet wandering around the corridor on the 7th floor this morning. But I didn't say hello to him. Lily said. The corridor on the 7th floor. Maureen and Hugo looked at each other. Chapter 47 The Chosen One. The corridor on the 7th floor again. The corridor on the 7th floor has become a synonym for mystery in Maureen's eyes. Everything that has happened recently seems to be related to the corridor on the 7th floor. But what Maureen can't figure out is what kind of magic is hidden in that classroom, and why Hugo saw different scenes when he went in and when Maureen went in. Maureen pondered for a long time, and then said, there is something I have always wanted to tell you, but I always feel that you don't believe it. No matter what, you need to help me analyze it. Maureen glanced at Hugo. He knew that when he said these words, Hugo would definitely be the first person to suspect him, but considering that Hugo was one of the missing people and they had just seen a mark of Grindelwald in the dormitory, he decided to tell what he had encountered recently. Maureen explained in detail how he went back to the past and that every time he went back to the past for no reason, someone would just disappear. By the way, he also told about the magic of his heterochromatic eyes mentioned by the Sorting Hat. What Maureen didn't expect was that Hugo was not the first person to suspect him, but Lily was. You said you went back to the past. Lily laughed. Maureen, don't be silly. Are you telling me that you have a time turner? Maureen shook her head. That's what's strange. If I had a time turner, all this can be explained. Lily put down her knife and fork and said, Maureen, I always thought you were a very rational person, smart, brave, extremely talented in magic, and would not talk nonsense, but what you said recently is really ridiculous. You said yesterday that Professor Trelawney made a prophecy for you. Don't be silly, okay? Time turner, mysterious prophecy, you have a rich imagination. Maybe he is right. Hugo, who was the best at making fun of others, surprisingly stood on Maureen's side. He did not doubt Maureen's words, but said seriously, for example, we just saw a mark of the Deathly Hallows on my body. Hugo, are you confused too? What does the mark of the Deathly Hallows have to do with you? Do you think you are also the chosen one? Lily laughed. I hope you can change your bad habit of always staying in bed, maybe then you won't talk nonsense. I'm not talking nonsense. Maureen was there at the time. I really wish there was a Muggle hair dryer that could record what we just saw. Hugo said dissatisfiedly. Yet, if you are smart enough, you should know that the Muggle equipment that can record things is called a camera. Thank God you can learn Muggle knowledge well in the Muggle studies class. Lily stood up and packed her things. I'll give you a suggestion. First, understand the Muggle knowledge, and then go to be the chosen one. After Lily finished speaking, she left the hall with her roommate Gemma. Why is Lily a little? Maureen looked at Lily's back, not knowing what to say. Arrogant and mean. Hugo shrugged his shoulders. She has always been like this to me, I'm used to it. I thought you would doubt what I said like Lily. Maureen helped Oi on the table get a piece of bacon and drank a sip of clear soup himself. If it was yesterday, maybe I would be suspicious. But, how can I explain this matter? It's impossible that both of us are hallucinating. The Deathly Hallows or the Mark of Grindelwald did not appear on me for no reason, right? Hugo took a bite of the chicken leg, then remembered something and continued, and your eyes, you just said that when the school started, the Sorting Hat mentioned the magic of heterochromatic pupils. I think it is very likely, because I was next to you just now, man, your eyes are really flashing with strange light, that is magic. Maureen did not see the strange vision of his eyes, so he didn't know how his eyes with different pupil colors cast magic just now. If it was weird, he felt that he saw some scenes of Hugo's lost memory. Do you believe in the prophecy? Lily doesn't really believe what I say. Maureen asked. Lily may not believe it, but I don't think you will lie. You know, Lily's father is a great hero who defeated Voldemort. She has an inexplicable worship complex for her father. She always thinks that her father can save the world, so she thinks her father is the chosen one, and Professor Trelawney should only give her father a prophecy. Of course, this is normal. Anyone would think that their father is a great hero. Even if he didn't save the world, at least I think my father is my backer. I think you have this idea too. Hugo put down the chicken leg in his hand. Every time he talked about his father Ron, he always had a complaining mentality, mostly because of the different Quidditch teams he supported. This was the first time Hugo said such a thing. Maureen's mouth moved twice, and he felt a little strange. He was different from Ron. He rarely saw his father in his childhood. Since he could remember, his parents were always working abroad and hadn't come back for several years. Maureen did not agree with Hugo's statement that his father was a great hero. He was more inclined to agree that his grandfather Alton was the person he could rely on. Hugo didn't know what Maureen was thinking, and continued, you mentioned these incredible things in front of Lily, just like telling Lily that you are the chosen one like her father, and she won't believe it. But let me say, no one stipulates that Professor Trelawney can only make predictions for one person, right? Maybe she was really making predictions for you at that time. She didn't make predictions for me, she just happened to say these unclear words in front of me, and what she said mentioned those people who were deprived of their memories peeked into the truth in the fog, which seemed to refer to you missing and amnesiac people. Maureen said. Hugo was surprised and said, so we are the protagonists of the prophecy. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. His eyes lit up. When he was with Lily, Lily would always laugh at him. Usually, Hugo would not care about Lily's words. After all, the two grew up together as childhood sweethearts and were cousins. But many children have a dream of becoming the chosen one, and Hugo is no exception. Tell me the content of the prophecy again, maybe we can figure something out together. Hugo put down his knife and fork. Normally, he would eat a few more chicken legs at this time, but now it seems that his curiosity about the prophecy exceeds his appetite. The prophecy is just a few words: the dark spirit awakens, time is disordered, the person who has been deprived of memory has peeked into the truth in the fog, pierced the disguise of the god of death, and the dead are on their way. Maureen repeated. The person who has been deprived of memory has peeked into the truth in the fog. So I lost my memory because I saw some truth? But what truth did I see? Hugo touched his chin, thinking. Chapter 48 The Missing Night. Hugo pondered these words carefully, muttering to himself, and after a moment he said, "You said just now that when you touched the mark on my body, you saw me go to the classroom on the 7th floor, push open the door of the classroom, and come into a fog. But I don't remember these things, but at that time, I saw your eyes flashing with a strange light. Does this mean that the magic of your heterochromatic pupils that the Sorting Hat mentioned is the ability to see those memories that have been taken away?" "I'm not sure, because I only saw a fog." Maureen shook his head. Hugo was eager to try, looked around, and then said, "In this case, we have no choice but to find out the truth ourselves, right?" He was in high spirits, and felt that it was no big deal for him to get lost and lose his memory once. On the contrary, he regarded it as an interesting experience. He would not object to if he disappeared again. So who should we start with? Mosby is from Hufflepuff, Delia is from Ravenclaw, and we don't talk to them much, so let's start with Jamie. Or the mysterious man in our dormitory. Hugo had given Sweet a name on the way, just like more than 20 years ago, when people didn't dare to call Voldemort by his real name, but called him the mysterious man. Don't call him that, many people don't like the name of the mysterious man. Maureen said. They left the hall and went to the corridor on the 7th floor. They checked the classroom again, but the classroom was the same as the last time Maureen came here, except for the swear words written by Peeves on the blackboard. There was no difference. I don't understand, why was this classroom foggy when you pushed it open last time, but when I pushed it open, it was just an ordinary classroom. Do you feel anything familiar? Maureen walked around the classroom and didn't see anything unusual. One thing, I feel a familiar chill, just like the mark of the Deathly Hallows, but I don't know where this chill comes from. It seems to fill this classroom, but it also seems to be gone. If there is magic in this classroom, it should be able to leave traces. Professor Francis said last time that no matter how advanced and hidden the magic is, it will leave traces. Hugo was confused in all his classes, but he learned the theoretical knowledge of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class solidly. Professor Francis's death threat teaching method was very useful, and Hugo listened to a lot. He touched the wall and checked the cracks in the corners of the classroom, but this method of searching was useless. At most, he found a few spiders and chalk heads thrown by Peeves in the corners. It's a pity that we don't know enough about magic. After searching for 10 minutes, Hugo gave up helplessly. They were just first-year students, and it was basically impossible to find traces of magic because they didn't have enough experience. Maureen also felt that something was wrong. He didn't feel the chill that Hugo said, but he found that he seemed to have forgotten something on the way here. Then Maureen reacted immediately. That's right. Sir Cadogan. Maureen opened the door of the classroom and ran towards the portraits hanging in the corridor. He came to the place where Sir Cadogan's portrait was hung, but it had been replaced by an oil painting of the college Quidditch game. What's wrong? Did you find any clues? Hugo asked. Sir Cadogan. His portrait is gone. I saw his portrait in this place the day before yesterday, but it disappeared today. Maureen searched all the portraits in the corridor on the 7th floor, but did not find the crazy but enthusiastic knight. Did someone move his portrait back? To the tower where Professor Trelawney is? Hugo asked. Go and have a look. It's a good opportunity for you to try to recall what's strange about the tower. Maureen turned a corner and ran towards the north tower of Hogwarts. Because it was the weekend, they didn't have to be as careful as at night. They ran for 10 minutes and arrived at the west tower. Maureen came to the place where Sir Cadogan brought him last time and stopped. Last time, Professor Trelawney walked to the platform where Sir Cadogan's portrait was, looked at the knight and said something strange. According to Sir Cadogan's words, the wall on the platform was originally where his painting was hung, but it was also empty. Sir Cadogan's portrait is not here. Do you think that the Mad Knight was murdered because he knew something? Hugo looked around and asked in a low voice. Murder? He is a painting, have you forgotten? Maureen said. Yes, people in paintings can visit each other. It is not easy to murder a person in a painting. He can take refuge in other paintings. But it is not necessarily the case. If there are no other paintings around the unlucky guy to hide, he can burn the person in the painting to death. Hugo guessed. What Hugo said is also possible. People in paintings can visit other paintings at will, but the premise is that there are other paintings next to their own portraits that can be used as a moving bridge. If someone took advantage of Sir Cadogan's absence and threw his portrait to a place where there were no other portraits around, once Sir Cadogan instantly returned to his own frame from other paintings, he would not be able to escape. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. Let's not think about it for now. Last time you said you were in the tower 1 second and on the 7th floor the next. Is that the tower? Maureen asked. Hugo frowned, recalled for a moment, and shook his head. I'm not sure. I only saw a spiral staircase and some windows at the time, but Gryffindor's tower is like this, isn't it? Maureen climbed up the winding stairs and looked carefully at the landscape paintings around him. Most of them were fruit portraits and landscape depictions, as well as some ancient buildings. Hugo pointed to a painting and said, I've heard of this ancient Roman Colosseum. It's very famous in the history of Quidditch games. A Quidditch game was held here. It can accommodate 100,000 wizards. I visited here with my family 2 years ago. Maureen walked over and took a look at the ancient Roman Colosseum on the wall. The circular classical building was extremely artistic, but unfortunately half of it was destroyed. It was recorded that the 99th Quidditch game was held in the ancient Roman Colosseum. At that time, in order to hold this event, countless Muggle-repelling spells were set up around the ancient Roman Colosseum. Later, after the game, the excited fans fired explosive spells to celebrate and blew up the ancient Roman Colosseum. This incident caused a great sensation at the time. The wizards requisitioned the Muggle venue to hold a game for convenience, but due to poor supervision after the game, the ancient Roman Colosseum was destroyed. Because of some unrest, it was not repaired in time. When the Muggles learned about it, it was too late to repair it. In the end, in order to cover up, they could only pass false news to the Muggles, explaining that the damage was caused by an earthquake. I heard that the Colosseum was used by Muggles to compete with wild animals. Muggles are so cruel. Look, there is a horse eating grass next to it. No one wants to duel with this fat pony, right? Hugo said with interest. Maureen looked at the pony eating grass on the grass next to the ancient Roman Colosseum in surprise and said, This is Sir Cadogan's horse. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Fat Pony. Sir Cadogan had a warhorse that was always ill-tempered. This horse often ran away from home and went to graze in other paintings. Sir Cadogan usually spent half of his time out looking for this fat pony, but when the pony was ill-tempered, it would always kick Sir Cadogan. Maureen didn't expect to see this pony in the tower. He remembered that when he came here with Sir Cadogan the night before, the pony was still grazing in other people's paintings in the corridor on the 7th floor. Sir Cadogan needed Maureen's help to get here because there were no portraits to clear the way. But how could the knight's pony appear here alone? If it wanted to walk here from the castle, it should have needed portraits along the way. Did someone really move Sir Cadogan's frame back, so the pony appeared here? It's a pity that we can't speak horse language, otherwise we could ask where its owner is. Hugo reached out and gently tapped the pony on the painting. The pony was tapped by Hugo, and it seemed very unhappy to kick its hind legs, turned around, and pointed its butt at them. Hugo tapped its butt again, and the pony kicked its hind legs in annoyance, trying to kick Hugo like it usually kicked Sir Cadogan, but it failed. It shook its tail and walked to the side. It seems that it doesn't like people flattering it. Hugo spread his hands helplessly. I think it must know where Sir Cadogan is. A horse can't come here through a road without portraits for no reason. Maybe Sir Cadogan is also nearby. Let's look for him in other paintings. Maureen said. He carefully searched for the portraits nearby again, trying to find the shadow of Sir Cadogan, but he couldn't find it after half an hour of searching. Sir Cadogan's passion for always charging into battle did not appear here. After eating grass on the grass in front of the ancient Roman Colosseum, the temperamental pony began to walk towards the tower along the paintings on the wall. Maureen noticed this phenomenon, so he called Hugo and followed the pony. This feeling is really strange. We are actually following a horse in a painting. Will it really go to find its owner? Hugo muttered. I don't know. Let's wait and see. The two of them followed the pony forward. The pony walked from the ancient Roman Colosseum into an oil painting of avocados and ate an avocado. Then he walked into a painting full of tableware, raised his hoof and stepped on the tableware on the table, and the tableware fell to the ground. Then he walked through a landscape painting of woods and mountains. There was a small house in front of the woods. As soon as the pony walked into this painting, he ran away in panic because a dog ran in front of the house and barked at it. The pony kept walking up along the paintings on the wall. Maureen and Hugo followed it, and finally came to another platform. There was a broom closet next to the platform. The pony stopped in a greenhouse with a painting of Mandrake next to the broom closet and began to wander around. Why isn't it moving? Does it want to eat the Mandrake? Hugo asked curiously. Maureen looked at the pony carefully and found that the pony was not moving, but couldn't move. It desperately walked to the right side of the greenhouse picture, trying to squeeze into another painting, but there was no painting next to it, only a broom closet. No, it wants to enter the next one. It is very likely that the painting is in the broom closet. Maureen reached out and pulled the door of the broom closet. The door was locked. He took out his wand and whispered aloud, "Ho, open." The door of the broom closet clicked and opened. A strange smell came to his nose, as if something was moldy. The ground was damp and the ceiling was covered with spider webs. Maureen glanced at the small broom closet. There were only some chairs and mops with missing legs, a few buckets and a piece of... What is this? Maureen squatted down and picked up a piece of burned paper in the corner. This is a piece of painting paper, which seems to have been cut by some sharp weapon, leaving only the size of a palm, and on the paper is half of Sir Cadogan's helmet and 1/3 of the hilt. Maureen was stunned for a moment, shocked. What's wrong? Hugo asked, puzzled. This helmet is Sir Cadogan, and this sword is also his. Maureen showed the scraps of paper he picked up to Hugo with a heavy heart. Hugo exclaimed, "Are you saying that someone really deliberately destroyed Sir Cadogan's painting?" Maureen didn't expect it to be like this. He searched the entire broom room, and except for this piece of remaining paper, there was no other part of the paper. The cut was still brand new, as if it was destroyed by a cutting spell or a crushing spell. Then is Sir Cadogan still alive? After Hugo asked this question, he felt that it was a bit wrong. Sir Cadogan was just a person in the painting. The only difference was that he said more than other people in the paintings of Hogwarts Castle. He didn't know if the word alive was appropriate. Maureen glanced at the pony wandering in the greenhouse. It seemed to be desperately trying to return to its own painting, but its original home was only a palm-sized fragment left, which could not accommodate its body. Maureen felt very uncomfortable. No wonder the pony did not return to its own portrait immediately, but had to walk back through other portraits step by step, because its portrait had been damaged. If things are really as we think, Sir Cadogan might have been in trouble. After he returned to his own painting, he was destroyed by someone using a cutting spell or a crushing spell. This broom closet is where Sir Cadogan's portrait is isolated. There are no other portraits here, and Sir Cadogan can't escape. Maureen said. The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. What about the other fragments? They should have been cleaned up. This one was left behind accidentally. Maureen felt inexplicably annoyed by what happened to Sir Cadogan. Although this guy was always crazy, he was talkative and enthusiastic after all. Suddenly, it was destroyed. It felt like someone Maureen knew was murdered. But who would be so cruel to murder a person in a painting? Hugo frowned. I don't know. One thing we can be sure of is that Sir Cadogan must know some secrets. Maybe he accidentally saw something he shouldn't have seen, so someone deliberately destroyed him. Maureen held the fragments of the painting, with a bunch of questions in his mind. Going back to the past, the amnesiac, the corridor on the 7th floor, the strange language, the portrait of Sir Cadogan. Everything seemed so confusing. Who was the person behind this? What should we do with this fragment? The night is gone, and this horse can only wander around in other paintings in the castle. What a pity. If it were a real horse, maybe Hagrid would be interested in taking care of it. Hugo looked at the pony with sympathy as it was still wandering around and couldn't find its way home. It had lost its home and had become a homeless child. Chapter 50 The Possibility of Survival. How to place the pony was not a problem that Maureen had to think about, because the pony could not speak, nor would it reveal the secrets it had seen. No one would destroy it, And it could still walk around in other paintings in the tower. He sympathized more with Sir Cadogan. This strange knight was more like an innocent victim who had been implicated because he had seen something he shouldn't have seen and became a thorn in the eyes of others. Should we tell the professor about this? The school's paintings were destroyed, which is not a trivial matter. Hugo asked. Maureen shook his head. Then how should we explain all this? The professor will not believe that I can go back to the past, and he may even suspect that we destroyed the paintings. Hugo nodded. You are right. Maureen pondered this matter carefully and said to himself, the origin of Sir Cadogan. By the way, maybe he is still alive. The paintings are destroyed like this, can he still survive? Hugo looked at the fragments in Maureen's hand. The helmet was cut open, and he thought there was little hope of survival. Maureen said seriously, there is another possibility. I remember that if a person has multiple portraits, the person in the portrait can visit his own portraits anytime and anywhere without relying on other paintings. If Sir Cadogan also has other portraits, then even if there are no paintings around to hide, he can run to another portrait of his own and escape. Hugo suddenly realized and nodded. Now that you mention it, I remember that there is a blank photo frame in my house. It is a portrait of my great-grandfather. My grandfather also has one at home. Whenever there is any news to inform us, my grandfather will ask the great-grandfather in the frame to convey it to our house through the photo frame. It is faster than an owl. Of course, sometimes the great-grandfather will also throw a tantrum and scold us for disrespecting the elderly and unwilling to run errands. At this time, we have to bribe him, take a rag dipped in butterbeer to wipe his photo frame or something. He liked to drink butterbeer when he was alive. Hugo realized that he had strayed off topic, and quickly turned back to say, although we do not rule out the possibility that Sir Cadogan is still alive, what if he does not have other portraits? In that case, once trapped in this dim broom closet, there will be no possibility of escape. Many paintings in the school have their origins, otherwise they would not be hung in the castle. Sir Cadogan's portrait is very large, and it must have been hung up because of some extraordinary achievements. We need to check Sir Cadogan's origins. Maybe he was a famous person in the past, and there are portraits of him in other places. Maureen said. Then where should we start to check? The library again. Hugo looked at the time and then reminded, don't worry about these for now, you still have to attend Quidditch training in the afternoon. Maureen remembered the Quidditch training. He put the fragments of Sir Cadogan's portrait into his school bag, and then quickly ran to the Gryffindor dormitory to change clothes. Sweet was not present during the afternoon Quidditch training. Maureen, Lily, didn't you two notify Sweet? Didn't I tell you that everyone had to be there? Poker asked loudly. He was very strict about Quidditch training. I didn't find him. Maureen shook his head. I told you last time that everyone had to be ready to participate in Quidditch training at any time. The game will start next week. I don't want anyone to miss training. It's not easy to apply for the Quidditch field, and you still have someone absent. Poker looked serious. James yawned. Don't take it seriously, Poker, he is just a substitute player. To be honest, with us here, the three of them can wait until next year to play. Shut up. James. I noticed that you and Albus are selling dangerous things every day. You will be caught sooner or later. If you are detained by the professor and can't participate in the game, you will know the role of substitute players at that time. Poker glared at James. James and Albus curled their lips without comment. Fighting wits and courage with a professor and surviving in danger has always been their life belief. Maureen was absent-minded during the afternoon Quidditch training. His mind was full of the strange things that happened recently. When James and Albus pretended to collide with each other as a joke, he accidentally threw the quaffle off target and hit James' broom, then bounced off the back of Pork's head, then bounced off Albus's broom, and finally scored a goal. Pork was very angry and scolded James and Albus, and even Maureen was implicated. I think you hit the ball beautifully, but it's a pity that Pork doesn't have eyes on the back of his head, otherwise he would know how you scored a goal. Believe me, this goal can definitely be ranked in the top 10 of the best goals in the history of Hogwarts Quidditch. James whispered to Maureen at the end of the training. Maybe. Maureen's goal was purely luck. He was absent-minded during the afternoon training. Then he remembered something and asked, James, have you found your Marauder's map? James shook his head. No, the damn thief hasn't been caught yet. But Albus and I have cast some magic on the folding box. The next time he dares to come, he will definitely regret doing such a thing. You should know more about Hogwarts than I do. Do you know any secret passages in the school? Maureen asked. James raised his eyebrows and then said with a sly smile, "Why are you asking this? Are you bored at school and want to sneak out to play? This is against school rules." It feels weird to hear the words against school rules from you. Aren't you always defying school rules? Maureen put the training broom back to its original place. He still didn't buy one for himself, and then continued, "I don't want to leave school. I'm asking you, is there any secret passage from the 7th floor of the castle to the North Tower? The latest novels are first published on Liuji 9 Shuba." James pondered for a moment and said, "How does the secret passage on the 7th floor lead to the North Tower? I remember the Marauder's map showed that there was a secret passage behind the statue of the Flatterer Gregory on the 7th floor, which led to the outside of the school, but it was sealed off by Headmistress McGonagall herself." Maureen thought of the elusive Room of Requirement again and continued to ask, "Have you ever looked for the Room of Requirement during your years at school?" "Of course I have. It's a very sacred place." James' eyes lit up. The Room of Requirement was like a place with endless treasures to him. If he found this room, it would be equivalent to establishing his own base. Last time, he and Albus discussed using the Room of Requirement as a supply point for Wheel-Eye's wagon shop. But James soon became depressed. "I have been looking for it for 4 years and still can't find it. Maybe it was really destroyed by the Fiend Fire. The guy who cast the Fiend Fire is a damn bastard who destroyed such a sacred place. Even you can't find it." Maureen has always suspected that the missing people went to the Room of Requirement. Only in this way can he explain why Mosby didn't show it in the Marauder's map last time. But if even James and Albus couldn't find it, then it would be hard to say whether the Room of Requirement is still there. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.